2 more hits, Lando said, plumes of icy air flowing over his lips. He behaved as if nothing had happened at all. This guy is really scary, but I have only unlocked the first tier of Jade Skin. If I was also half deified, he wouldn't be acting so cocky. Han Sen took 2 steps back and frowned. After pausing, Han Sen had an idea. He gathered up power in his fist once more. But this time, he didn't punch Lando once. He cast a continuous punch, but the power was unleashed at an extremely slow speed. It was as if it was crawling like a snail. All of a sudden, Han Sen cast countless punches. The power of each punch was like a wave, and as they swept forward, they gathered together to become a terrifying force. As Han Sen kept attacking, the waves built up. The scary powers were multiplied. It was like a tsunami was now headed for Lando. The sea of clouds all around was shoved out of the way by Han Sen's waves. They created a large vacuum zone. The scary power coming for Lando was like the wind blowing through the galaxy. Lando's muscles tightened up. The muscles in his body were moaning with the groans of the dragon. He didn't attempt to avoid it. He simply endured the power unleashed by Han Sen, power that had been multiplied several times. Pang! Han Sen's power came down on Lando's body, annihilating his armor. That multiplied force of the attack was mind-blowing. Lando's king-class armor was turned to dust, and the remaining fragments were scattered everywhere. They glittered around him like a cloud of tiny stars. But when the scary power came crashing against Lando's muscles, the blood vessels were highlighted so well that they looked like tattoos. The shockwave-like attack struck Lando's muscles, and the attack crumbled. Lando's body remained uninjured. What a powerful body! Han Sen looked at Lando in shock. Although Han Sen hadn't expected to defeat Lando with that hit, he expected it to send the man staggering back. He didn't even twitch, though. That made Han Sen feel afraid. You only have 1 strike remaining. Lando's body was completely naked. His strong chest was emblazoned with a tattoo of a dragon. His face was impassive as he spoke. Han Sen went silent for a bit, and then he pulled out his Thunder God Spike. In that case, it's time to bring out the big guns. I hope you don't blame me later for what's about to happen. The Thunder God Spike wasn't a very destructive tool, but its paralytic power was difficult to withstand. Even a deified being would feel a blow from this weapon. No matter how strong Lando was, he couldn't be any stronger than a deified. Thinking of all this, Han Sen placed his power into the Thunder God Spike. Power crackled across the Thunder God Spike, bursting into waving colors like the northern lights. You really aren't going to dodge this thing? Han Sen asked, lifting the Thunder God Spike and looking at Lando. Lando didn't respond, but there was an obvious, albeit unspoken desire for Han Sen to just hurry up and get on with things. Han Sen was fine with that. He lifted his Thunder God Spike, aiming it to strike Lando in the head. He knew he would be unable to crack the man's head open, but the sheer amount of power that the spike could deliver should be enough to make Lando move. Pang! The lightning crackling all around the Thunder God Spike connected with the side of Lando's head, and the streaks of silver power went straight into his skull. Lando's head jerked back. Han Sen was so happy about this, and he thought this was sure to be the one. But Lando only moved his head. His entire body didn't move. Silver light streaked over Lando's head, and white smoke streamed from his hair, but he didn't seem to react to the hit. He straightened his neck out, and while lightning still flashed across the Thunder God Spike, it didn't seem to bother him. Han Sen was frozen. He couldn't summon words to speak. His body was strong too, but even he couldn't have endured the hit he had just dished out. Lando's complete lack of reaction was stunning. Lando used his fingers to touch the Thunder God Spike. He pushed it aside and said, "My body is already destroyed. There is no sensation within me. Pain, numbness, and dizziness don't exist in my body. The numbing effect brought on by lightning is ineffective against someone like me. All that did was give me a tiny buzz of electricity." "I see. No wonder the Thunder God Spike didn't work on you," Han Sen said with a wry smile. "Let's go." Lando turned around to leave. Han Sen hesitated a moment, but he did follow. He had no plans to escape. "You plan to keep your promise?" Lando looked at Han Sen. "Not really, but I knew trying to escape from you would be futile." Han Sen shrugged his shoulders. You are an honest man, Lando said with surprise. Han Sen didn't say anything, but inside, he thought to himself, I can't even tell which direction we are headed. I don't even know where Bauer is. Running around the Tianxia system won't solve anything. There must be many people like Lando after me. It's best to follow him now. If I run into any trouble up ahead, he will protect me. This isn't a bad idea for the time being. Han Sen followed Lando. Since the dragon noticed that Han Sen didn't seem likely to run off, he didn't tie Han Sen up. They flew through the clouds in a direction that Han Sen decided to call up, and after a while, they saw a group of people in front of them. Lando! The people screamed upon seeing Lando, and when they saw Han Sen, they were even more shocked. Lando, why are you with Han Sen? The king class leader asked Lando. Lando ignored him and kept flying. The king's face reddened with the snub, but he didn't complain to Lando. The people that were in Lando's way all backed off. They formed a path for him, with not one person trying to stand in his way. They knew better than that. But Han Sen wasn't so lucky. He tried to follow Lando, but the people circled around him, blocking his way forward. They clearly intended to take Han Sen down together. Lando, why are you going so fast? Come and deal with these guys. They're starting to annoy me, Han Sen said with disdain. The people had been preparing to beat Han Sen up, but when they heard him say this, they seemed shocked. They glanced between Han Sen and Lando. Han Sen had just spoken as if Lando was his subordinate. Don't get in his way, Lando commanded without even turning his head. For the first time, Han Sen started to realize how much fear Lando inspired in the people of the Geno universe. The moment he spoke, all the others backed away from Han Sen. Han Sen just flew by 100 kings. They all just watched him go, not doing anything to him. What should we do? Why is Han Sen with Lando? One of the kings asked their leader with confusion. No matter how strong Lando is he stronger than a true deified? With all the people that have come to the Tianxia system, there must be someone who is stronger than Lando. If we release this nugget of news, we might be able to take advantage of the ruckus. The leader laughed darkly. Han Sen followed Lando through the sea of clouds. They encountered many elites who had come in search of Han Sen, but whenever those elites saw Lando, they gave him a wide berth. No one would dare to go against Lando, especially face to face. But Han Sen could still feel the weight of many eyes resting on him, and that sensation gradually increased as time went by. Technological gadgets were of no use in the Tianxia system, but that didn't mean that the various bounty hunters had no way of tracking him. Many people with eyes and video powers, especially the kings with such talents, could watch Lando and Han Sen from tens of thousands of miles away. Lando simply flew forward, but he eventually came to a sudden stop. Han Sen could sense something odd ahead of them. As he looked forward, some shadows started to emerge from behind the green clouds. The figures all looked the same. Butterfly wings adorned with luscious patterns spread from their backs. Their bald heads each had 2 antennae dangling from them, and their bodies were clad in a black bug armor. There were 6 of these people. They flapped their wings and flew over to Lando. Han Sen observed the 6 of them, but he couldn't distinguish one from another. They all looked the same, and in their identical armor, they looked like sextuplets. Han Sen wasn't foolish enough to underestimate them based on their odd appearance, however. They were all 8th or 9th tier kings. Some of them might have even been half-deified. It was made obvious that they were uniquely powerful by the way they dared to stand in front of Lando. Ordinary kings wouldn't dare bar his path. Lando, please do a favor for the 6 brothers. We would appreciate it, said the strange man leading them. Who are you guys? Lando asked lazily, not raising his eyes. You, the strange man in front hissed in anger.
Fine, Lando.
We were going to show respect to the king of the destroyed, but if you really have a death wish, the Butterfly Fairy 6 kings can help you fulfill it. After that, the 6 strange people flapped their wings and flew toward Lando. You find a safe place and sit tight. Wait for me there a little, Lando said calmly. Han Sen heard the order, and so he flew far away from that portion of the sea of clouds. The Butterfly Fairy 6 kings watched Han Sen leave, but they didn't give chase because Lando was watching them. So, they decided to surround Lando and deal with him before going after Han Sen. Han Sen kept flying without looking back. The butterfly fairy 6 kings used an area, and the butterfly wings on their backs glowed with 6 different colors. When the 6 areas and 6 colors came together across them all, it became a 6-color area. It locked Lando within its radius. Pang! Lando punched the 6-color area, but his blow had no effect. Han Sen was shocked as he glanced over his shoulder. All 6 of the butterfly fairies were half-deified. There was no longer any doubt about that. Now that the 6 of them had combined their areas into one, the potency of their individual areas must have multiplied by that number as well. If Lando's power wasn't enough to break that area, it was no wonder they had dared to threaten him to capture Han Sen for themselves. From afar, Han Sen heard one of the butterfly fairies say, "Lando, it doesn't matter how strong you are. You have fallen into our butterfly fairy 6 king 6 fairy area. It will stop you from moving in any direction." Lando ignored their words and just started throwing punches around himself. The 6 fairy area trembled a little, but it didn't buckle and break. Upon seeing the situation, Han Sen turned and flew even faster. He was thinking to himself, "It looks like Lando might not be able to kill those guys for some time. This is the perfect chance for me to escape. Wait for you? I'm too smart to sit around and wait for you to recapture me." Ignoring the situation behind him, Han Sen focused on trying to escape. He wanted to get as far away from Lando as possible. He had followed Lando for long enough to grasp where he was in the system. Although he could not determine exactly where Bauer was, he had a rough idea of which direction she had probably headed. Han Sen didn't head straight in Bauer's direction, though. He took the scenic route and went the long way around. He wanted to shake the beings that he knew were lurking in the clouds, watching his every move. But despite traveling so fast and so far, Han Sen wasn't stopped by anyone. He switched directions a few times as he made his escape, but still, no one tried to stop him. Weird. Why is no one coming after me? Han Sen wondered to himself. Then he finally figured it out. The people watching him were still scared of Lando. Because of that, they weren't going to capture Han Sen until he had escaped far enough from Lando. Upon this realization, Han Sen stopped trying to throw off his tails. Heading in a straight line, he sped up to leave Lando's region. Of course, when Han Sen had gotten a fair distance from Lando, there were some creatures that just couldn't resist the temptation of jumping out to ambush him. There were a few dozen kings that hailed from several different races. They were a very disorganized and eclectic group. None of them thought that they could defeat Han Sen individually, so they had formed a temporary alliance. Han Sen looked at them, and he noticed they weren't the same kings he encountered earlier. The group of kings from earlier were just a few yahoos. They just had numbers, around 100, and nothing else. There were only 20 or 30 people in this group. 3 of them were half-deified, and it seemed as if they were the leaders of the temporary alliance. Han Sen, you should just surrender yourself. Don't make us hurt you, one of the half-deified leaders said to Han Sen. Han Sen didn't say a word. Instead, he replied by sending a quick punch toward them. He was thinking to himself, "Who do you think you are? King Lando? You're afraid you might hurt me? First, you need to have what it takes to hurt me." Seeing Han Sen move, the half-deified suddenly shouted, "Boss, there you go." Han Sen felt weird. He didn't know what the guy meant. He stopped moving and looked at another half-deified. This half-deified looked like a black tiger. He heard the call and roared, unleashing a black area. It looked to be attuned with the element of water. Han Sen wasn't afraid of a water element area due to the fact he had the original Water King body. He could use the water to his advantage. The water wouldn't hurt him. Before Han Sen's punch reached the half-deified's face, the black area settled around him. The other 30 kings used their own areas, as well. They had all kinds of areas, but when they overlapped the black tiger's area, the black area consumed them. The black area grew darker, and it suddenly made Han Sen feel as if he had fallen into an endless pit. He reached out with his hands, but he could no longer see his fingers. Not a water area? Han Sen was surprised. The dark area consumed the areas of the other kings, and then it became a giant black object that looked like an egg. When the black tiger gathered up its power, that black object shrank, growing smaller and smaller. The darkness within it became thicker and thicker, however. The darkness started to feel like a liquid as it pressed against Han Sen. His body could move through it, but when the darkness became deeper, something started to resist his motion. It was like he was inside cement that was becoming solid. Soon after, his body was stuck and he could no longer move. Under the Black Tiger's area power, a 3-meter-tall, egg-like object formed and trapped Han Sen. Han Sen tried to deploy his jade skin and break the black area, but he noticed that the darkness encasing him was as solid as it was terrifying. He couldn't move at all. What is this area? Han Sen felt strange, but he wasn't worried. The area seemed to consume the areas of others to empower its own, but it didn't actually deal any damage. All it seemed to do was trap him in the dark. If Han Sen really wanted to leave, he could use his super god spirit body to flee from the darkness. No matter how solid that darkness was, it couldn't bind him permanently. What's wrong, Han Sen? Not so cocky now. The kings all laughed loudly in unison. The dark area might have been solid, but it wasn't insulated against sound. Han Sen could hear what they were saying clearly. This area isn't bad. What is its name? Han Sen asked. The kings heard his question, and the half-deified that Han Sen conversed with earlier said, "This is Big Sky King's Black Big Sky King area. It has consumed 20 of our king area powers to trap you inside. And it doesn't just work on you either. Even if Lando was here, we'd have shut him in there with you. If that was true, why didn't you try to capture me when Lando was around?" Han Sen asked with amusement. "We didn't want to offend the ruler of the destroyed," the king answered. "We don't need to talk to him. Let's take him to the Extreme King so we can collect the bounty," another half-deified said, cutting off the conversation. Han Sen felt the darkness start to move. He knew that the kings were moving through the Tianxia system, pulling the dark area along with them. Han Sen tried to use the Dongxian area to get a better view of the dark area. He noticed that the substances composing the dark area were tightly woven, almost like a substance chain. This is a very powerful area. It is showing the signs of creating a substance chain. Maybe this black tiger is on the verge of becoming deified, Han Sen thought to himself. The black area absorbed the areas of others to become very hard. Han Sen used Super Spank, but he still couldn't break it. He decided to take a bit of a break. He was going to recover his energy before giving it another try. The kings were very excited. They pulled the egg-like area toward the edge of the Tianxia system. But not long after, Han Sen heard a scream from outside his prison. That scream was the half-deified who had conversed with Han Sen earlier. After that scream, Han Sen heard something that sounded like space ripping. And then, everything grew quiet. Han Sen kept listening, but he couldn't hear any other sounds. Aside from that initial scream, there was no other sound to be heard. It was as if all the kings and half-deified people had suddenly run for the hills. Weird. Even if they saw an enemy, they should have said something. Why was there only one scream and then silence? Were they all killed before they could make a sound? Han Sen thought to himself. Catcha. As Han Sen was considering what might have happened, he suddenly heard a sound like rocks breaking. Then, a beam of light broke through the darkness that surrounded him. The giant egg cracked, and a webwork of light spread across its surface. It eventually shattered completely, freeing Han Sen. What Han Sen saw next shocked him, though. Lando was hovering there, looking at him calmly. Han Sen coughed awkwardly into his hand. "I was afraid you would be unable to beat the Butterfly Fairy 6 Kings, so I may have run farther than I should have. I was caught by these people and brought to where you are now." Han Sen had wanted to be taken by those people because he hoped they would take him farther away from Lando. But it seemed as if that plan hadn't worked out the way he'd hoped. "Let's go." Lando said nothing more. He turned around and started to fly away. Han Sen fell into place behind Lando again, but as they flew, he thought to himself, how was he able to find me so quickly? Even if he was able to defeat the Butterfly Fairy 6 Kings with ease, I intentionally took a route that would have been difficult to follow. And this Tianxia system is pretty much a maze. How was he able to tell where I was in such a short amount of time? Han Sen knew that he was missing something important. He immediately used the Dongxian aura to check his body. It wasn't long before he felt something out of place in one of his fingers. The skin on his fingers was fine, but on a bone in one of the fingers in his left hand, there was a tadpole-shaped mark. That mark was tiny, and it didn't even release any power. Han Sen hadn't even noticed its presence until that moment. If he hadn't grown suspicious and used the Dongxian aura to scan his body, he wouldn't have found that weird, gray symbol on one of his bones. Han Sen remembered that Lando had struck and cracked a few of his fingers. The mark must have been placed during that strike. That's why he feels so safe without physically binding me. It's because he already has a tracker on me. Something about the idea of being tracked everywhere he went made Han Sen deeply uncomfortable. But that gray mark wouldn't stop Han Senator. It was easy to remove, too. All he had to do was use his super god spirit body. But Han Sen didn't do anything about it just yet. He kept cool and pretended as if the mark had gone undiscovered. He continued to follow Lando. Lando, did you kill those butterfly fairy 6 kings? Han Sen asked, flying up next to Lando. Lando said quietly, I'm not a butcher. I don't kill when it isn't necessary. What about your master, then? You must have had a reason to kill him, Han Sen inquired. Emotion flashed over Lando's face, but it soon returned to normal. With that same cold tone of voice, he said, That is none of your business. Say something that is my business, then. Why are you taking me to the Extreme King? I didn't think someone like you would care about a reward, Han Sen said. There's a sword. Lando seemed like a nice person to chat with. He didn't sound like the teacher-slaying murderer the legend spoke of. Han Sen had imagined the man would be difficult to talk to, but that wasn't the case. What sword could be worth that much? If you want a weapon, I can give you a deified weapon. You'll find me easier to trade within the Extreme King. Han Sen wanted to learn more. I only want that sword, Lando said as he moved forward. He didn't turn to look at Han Sen. A sword that you have to trade a life for must be very special. Why don't you tell me what is so special about this sword? Han Sen said with curiosity. Lando didn't respond. It was obvious he had no intention of telling Han Sen anything else about this sword that he wanted so badly. Han Sen started to say something else, but he suddenly heard the sound of something stampeding toward them through the clouds. It sounded like 1,000 horses running all at once. He raised his head and saw a group of unicorns burst through the clouds. They looked like an endless sea of white. All emotion left Lando's face. He spoke to Han Sen, saying, Protect yourself. Now Han Sen knew another reason that Lando hadn't tied him up. Lando knew that the way back to the Extreme King wouldn't be safe. If he had to hold on to Han Sen in a fight, it would be too much trouble. Letting Han Sen run off on his own would allow Lando to focus his attention on whoever was attacking them. You're very calculating, but you've underestimated me. Han Sen. You think a mere tracking mark can beat me? Han Sen laughed sinisterly, but he didn't stick around to gloat. He ran off in the opposite direction. It wasn't long into his escape attempt that he saw a group of gold unicorns coming at him from another cloud. They were everywhere. And there were as many of these gold ones as there were white unicorns the other way. OSH*T. Why are there so many xenogeneics? Han Sen drew his knife and ran straight into the unicorn herd. The sword lights flashed. Blood was everywhere. He immediately killed a few unicorns. Xenogeneic Duke hunted. Xenogeneic gene found. They really are xenogeneics. Han Sen kept pushing through the enormous herd of unicorns, massacring them as he went. His ghost teeth knife cut them down like a scythe through a wheat field. But he wasn't harvesting wheat. He was harvesting lives. The unicorns didn't relent. Han Sen kept slicing and dicing, and blood splashed all around him. He killed countless unicorns in no time at all. Han Sen suddenly heard a long scream. A glowing unicorn stepped through the herd. It was twice as large as the ordinary gold unicorns, and its horn was pure gold as well. It was thundering toward Han Sen, and its body seemed to strain the space around it as it ran. Han Sen slashed at the unicorn's horn. The blade and the horn collided with a metallic shriek. Han Sen bounced away a few hundred meters before coming to a stop. Before Han Sen restabilized, he saw another unicorn coming for him. This next one was black, and it radiated a terrifying amount of power. It was no weaker than the enormous gold unicorn. Han Sen sent a punch toward the black unicorn. The ice light landed on the black unicorn, but the creature shone with a black light. It was as if a shield manifested, blooming from the tip of the creature's horn. It was shaped like a spindle. The ice light, when it touched down on the shield, was ricocheted away. It had been completely unable to pierce the fusiform area the creature had created. Pang! The black unicorn smashed into Han Sen's body, breaking him in two. He turned into dust, but then his real body reappeared on the other side of the field of battle. As he turned, he saw another large unicorn coming for him. This one was a stark white. OSH*T. Why are the white unicorns coming for me, as well? Isn't Lando over there? He began to wonder if Lando had played a trick on him. But when he looked closer, he saw Lando engaged in combat with a rainbow-colored unicorn. The rainbow-colored unicorn was emitting a rainbow-colored godlight. But as he watched the light shimmer and warp reality around it, he knew that it was a deified unicorn. How unlucky am I to encounter this deified xenogeneic? Han Sen felt depressed. Even Lando wouldn't be able to handle a deified xenogeneic. It seemed as if the situation was going from bad to worse. Since the rest of the unicorns couldn't get anywhere close to the fight between Lando and the deified unicorn, they came for Han Sen instead. Han Sen had already encountered 4 half-deified unicorns, and now there was an entire ocean of lesser unicorns coming after him. If Han Sen stayed to fight, he'd wear his hand down to nubs even if the unicorns lined up so he could kill them one by one. When a red unicorn also began running toward him, Han Sen had an idea. His left eye flashed with red. He turned into a bloody shadow and hopped into the red unicorn's eyes. Losing their target in the blink of an eye left all the unicorns shocked and confused. They looked around, trying to find Han Sen, but none of them could figure out where he had gone. Han Sen didn't stop in the eye of the red unicorn, though. He immediately teleported into the eye of another unicorn. He kept bouncing through the herd of unicorns, never staying in any particular host for more than a second. Although 4 of the unicorns were half-deified, Han Sen wasn't really scared of them. What unsettled him was the strange timing of the unicorn's arrival. Han Sen felt like there were larger forces at work here, forces that he hadn't yet identified. He kept moving through the unicorn herd, flickering between the eyes of the beasts. By doing this, he was able to inch his way to the edge of the battleground. He kept watch over the unicorns as he moved, trying to discern what had inspired their sudden attack, but he still hadn't noticed anything out of place. Did I overthink this? I guess their attack was a good thing, all in all. At least this way, I can escape Lando. He's still trying to fight that deified unicorn and all the rest. I don't think he'll make it. Even if he does make it out, he won't be able to catch me again, Han Sen thought. By this time, he had made it to the edge of the unicorn horde. He came out of the eye of the furthest one and tried to fly away unnoticed. Pang! Han Sen felt as if he had run face first into a steel board. He reeled back, his nose weeping blood. What is this? Han Sen looked forward, but he couldn't see anything. He reached out his hand to touch whatever he had crashed into, and he realized it was some sort of invisible shield. There's something wrong here. Han Sen touched the invisible shield. His body flew up a few hundred miles, but his hands kept in contact with the shield. There was no end to it. Han Sen traveled another 1,000 miles, but there was no sign that the invisible shield would end anytime soon. He had no idea how far it went. What is this? Who is doing this? Han Sen was shocked. If that shield covered the entire battleground, then that meant there had to be an additional deified being who was pulling strings in this battle. Only someone of that level could create a shield so strong and large. Han Sen opened his Dongxian aura and used the purple butterfly in his right eye to see if he could discern more about the invisible shield. He immediately saw that the thing prohibiting his passage was an invisible substance chain wall. He looked ahead and saw that the wall surrounded the entire area. There was no end to it. There really is a deified elite behind all this. Han Sen took a deep breath. He didn't understand why the deified elite hadn't revealed itself and fought. He only knew that the deified had locked down the battleground, and now, Han Sen couldn't escape. Suddenly, Han Sen's left finger grew hot. A beam of gray light emerged from his finger, glowing from the symbol painted on to one of his metacarpals. The mark seemed to fade away from his finger, and the gray light formed the image of Lando in front of him. Stop running. This place has been locked down by a deified elite. We need to kill every xenogeneic here. Otherwise, we die. said the mark that had turned into the shadow of Lando. Why? Han Sen frowned. There is no why. We simply aren't strong enough to have any other options. I may not like this, but someone is using us as chess pieces right now. Lando's shadow slowly disappeared. It seemed as if the power was extinguished. Lando had placed the mark on Han Sen to keep him on a leash, but now he had simply torn the mark off. That told Han Sen how serious of a situation they were in. Lando wasn't bluffing. Han Sen had only been hovering there for a short time when the horde of unicorns found him again. They rushed toward him in a crazed mass. Han Sen didn't use his Blood-Eye Evil God power this time. Instead, he drew his Ghost Teeth Knife and Thunder God Spike. With them in hand, he plunged into the field of battle. In a few seconds, he slew a dozen unicorns. Xenogeneic Duke hunted. White unicorn. Xenogeneic gene found. Obtained white unicorn beast soul. After killing a few more unicorns, Han Sen received this beast soul announcement. Han Sen took a quick glance into his sea of soul and noticed that it was a mount beast soul. He could use it to travel, but it wouldn't fight. In this situation, using a mount would be pointless. There were too many other unicorns about. Maneuverability was incredibly important right now, and using a mount would be too cumbersome. The unicorns came in 7 different colors. The colors he had seen thus far included black, white, purple, red, gold, blue, and green. The unicorns of each color were divided into ordinary dukes, kings, and half-deifieds. Each color possessed different area powers. Just like the Demon Bug King by Sima that Han Sen used to use, the unicorn's powers could be overlapped and increased. But while Han Sen's old shield was a purely defensive by Sima, and the areas of the unicorns could also be used to attack, Han Sen had to deal with the group of unicorns and fight 7 unicorn kings at the same time. It was a very chaotic fight. There were simply too many unicorns. Although Han Sen was able to avoid engaging directly with the unicorn kings, he had his hands full just killing the lesser unicorns. The blood that flowed in his wake was like a river. Han Sen's hands soon grew tired. F***CK. What is going on? Han Sen looked over to Lando, who was still fighting that deified unicorn. Han Sen was so far away that he couldn't see their battle clearly, though. All he could see was the shifting light of 7 colors. He knew the deified unicorn had the upper hand. Lando was having a hard time dealing with the creature's attacks. I hope the legends about him are true, and he can actually take down a deified Xenogeneic. If those tales aren't true, I don't think he will last very long. Han Sen gritted his teeth. While Han Sen and Lando fought, a giant turtle hovered above the clouds. That giant turtle was carrying a pavilion upon its back. A dragon man and a deified of the destroyed were drinking tea together. Behind the dragon man was a female dragon servant, holding a Wanjia Rubik's Cube. It was filming Han Sen and Lando's battle. Every person in the Geno universe was watching the tremendous fight unfold. Close, it doesn't look like you are going to win. The dragon man sipped tea and smiled at the destroyed. Winning or losing, it's all the same to me. If I lose, you can have Lando and Han Senator, I won't get in the way of that. But if you lose, you won't betray our terms, will you, Dragon One? Close's 6 eyes looked at the dragon man while he spoke. We dragon always keep our promises. If Lando and Han Sen can kill all of these unicorns and survive, the dragon will leave the Tianxia system and cease all involvement in this matter, Dragon One said firmly. Although the dragon man was being referred to as Dragon One, he wasn't the same Dragon One that Han Sen had seen before. This was the Dragon One of a previous generation. In that case, let's wait for the result. Close grabbed his cup of tea and had a sip. He looked rather relaxed. Dragon One could see that Close didn't appear worried. He smiled and asked, "You aren't afraid of Lando being killed by that deified unicorn? If that happens, what will you tell the king of the destroyed? He is just a servant. If he joins the extreme king, he knows he might sacrifice his ties to the destroyed," Close said slowly. His face didn't move a muscle. After that, Close's expression became interested. He looked at Dragon One and said, "I'm afraid this is the dragon's best chance at capturing Lando. If you fail, how will you explain that to the king of the dragons? Lando has to die. You really think he can defeat a deified being all alone?" Dragon One shot back, his tone dripping with derision. Han Sen is still there. Close laughed. He's just a first-tier king. It doesn't matter how experienced he might be. He's no more than a strong ant, Dragon One growled. Close didn't say anything more. He looked at the dragon servant holding the Wanjia Rubik's Cube and said, I can't believe that someone as strong and smart as you has decided to use the live stream of the Thousand Treasures Alliance to his advantage. No matter the resource, I can find ways to make use of it, Dragon One said with a chilly smile. All the creatures in the Geno universe were watching this stream if they had the time. But the video that Dragon One was streaming wasn't as polished as the previous videos that had come from the Treasure Identifier Elder. He didn't have a professional team to handle the video, so he just played it straight to the broadcasting networks, 1:1 as things happened. There was no editing or cleanup. So, many creatures were unable to see that Lando was actually fighting a deified unicorn. They could only see a video of flashing lights. It was like the lights you'd see at the end of the world. In Han Sen's fight, high-level kings and dukes were able to make out a bit more. So, most of the kings, dukes, and nobles tuned into Han Sen's battle. Some powerful elites focused on Lando and his fight against the deified unicorn. They knew that Lando's performance would determine whether both he and Han Sen lived or died. But they also wanted to know more about just how strong Lando truly was. Although Lando had once killed a deified elite, most elites believed there had to be more to the tale. After all, Lando's teacher wasn't just an ordinary deified. And the way that Lando slew his teacher indicated that they were missing information. This is too scary. That Han Sen is surrounded by kings and half-deifieds, and yet he hasn't lost his advantage. He has killed so many unicorns. He's even managed to bring down 2 king unicorns. What impressive power. It's a shame, really. If he hadn't been reckless enough to kill an extreme king prince, he could have become famous across the entire universe. I think that Isha has the most cause to be upset about what has happened. Han Sen's genes aren't stable, and yet she actually brought him all the way up to king class. I can't imagine how many resources and how much effort was spent on him to get that done. But now, it's all gone. We don't even know if what Han Sen has done will affect her. Isha is smart. When Han Sen received Kong Fei's deified feather, many normal elites wanted to adopt him. But Isha was the one that took him in and brought him up to king class. No one expected Han Sen to become this strong when he reached king. I bet those other elites really regret it now. What would they be regretting? No matter how strong he is, he's just a king. Not even a deified could get out of a predicament like this, let alone a king. Killing. Crazy killing. Han Sen didn't know how many unicorns he had killed so far, but after dealing out so much death, it seemed that a hazy red film had formed over his vision. Katcha. The head of a king-class black unicorn was hewn open by Han's senator as blood poured out of the severed head. Han Sen rammed a hand into it and pulled out a crystal. He put it in his mouth. It was the king-class unicorn's xenogeneic gene. Han Sen immediately swallowed and refined it. The gene filled up his king-class genes and restored his energy. After having to kill so many enemies, he had lost a lot of his strength. He couldn't use his Dongxian armor to recover his power quickly, so he absorbed power from space itself. But even then, it wasn't enough to sustain him in a fight like this. Instead, Han Sen used Consume to quickly refine the king-class gene. The power kept Han Sen in the game. He would have collapsed by now if he hadn't done this. The whole cloudscape of the Tianxia system had been painted in blood. The unicorns had no fear of death, and that was especially true of the 7 unicorn kings. All of them wielded godlights, and the rainbow area they produced was causing Han Sen a lot of trouble. Because Han Sen had the blood-eye evil god beast soul, he could transport himself into the eyes of one of the unicorns if he found himself in danger. If he hadn't done that every now and again, he would have already been skewered by the 7 unicorn kings. Han Sen had tried jumping into the eyes of the 7 unicorn kings. He wanted to attack them from inside their eyes, to see if he could kill them from within. But the eyes of the 7 unicorn kings were special. The eyes of each unicorn king were a different color, and it was impossible to see their pupils, irises, or even the whites of their eyes. Something about their multicolored eyes kept them from reflecting Han Sen's image. So, he couldn't use his blood-eye evil god beast soul on them. 7 half-deifieds were now attacking him, An ordinary king would have long since been killed by their rainbow-colored power. Han Sen depended on the blood-evil god beast's soul, and that was how he was able to last so long without being hurt. After Han Sen consumed another king-class gene, he suddenly had a weird announcement play in his head. King-class genes have reached 100. Battle body area is ready for evolution. Han Sen grinned. He had absorbed many king-class genes before, and after absorbing those last few, his collected sum had now reached 100. It was just as he had expected, too. 100 king-class genes could increase the tier of his area by 1. Without any hesitation, Han Sen chose to level up his Jade Skin area. He couldn't use his Dongxian area unless he was using Dollar's identity, so Jade Skin had become his primary power. Han Sen used the genes to level up his Jade Skin area, and when he did, a cool feeling flowed through his flesh and bones. It was like his body was a dried-up riverbed, and water was suddenly flowing through it once more. After the modification of his genes, his cells started to change, making Han Sen's body glow. He looked perfect, like some newborn deity. The fight had exhausted Han Sen, but now, he was in his best shape. No, he was doing better than he was in his best shape. Pang! An icy light covered ghost teeth knife. It came down on the head of one king unicorn, and it cut the third-tier king and its area in half. Han Sen began murdering everything around him. It was like he was in a herd of sheep. When his knife light flashed, many unicorns died in an instant. He increased his area level during a fight. All of the race elites were frozen. If a fighter increased their king area, their personal strength actually decreased briefly during the process. Leveling up an area modified one's genes to spark an evolution of one's cells. The body was slightly weakened while this change was underway, and although it was nothing life-threatening, it was best to choose a safe and secure location while undergoing such a process. Accidents were best avoided. The idea of fighting while leveling up an area at the same time was simply ridiculous. The evolution of Han Sen's area had happened too fast. Most of the changes happened within seconds. Evolving at that rate wasn't rare in the Geno universe, but it usually only happened with primitive creatures. The genes of a primitive creature had unknown possibilities, and under the influence of an exterior force, they could evolve quickly. The higher the level of the creature was, the more solid their genes were. It became harder to evolve, so the speed of every evolution was slower. Han Sen was already king class, and he moved up an entire tier in just a second. To the elites who were watching the video stream, it seemed unbelievable. Maybe it's because his genes aren't stable. There are way too many possibilities, and that is why he evolved so fast, many of the king-class people thought. Regardless, they couldn't avert their gazes from Han Sen. Jade Skin had achieved its second-tier area. Han Sen's body's power and speed were increased, but it still wouldn't be enough for him to beat that seven-colored unicorn. Pang! Han Sen was fighting like mad. A crack appeared in the sky, and it was coming his way. Pang! A huge number of unicorn bodies were suddenly torn apart by that crack in the fabric of space. Han Sen avoided its power, but then someone fell from that rent in space. Lando! Han Sen was shocked. Lando had apparently created the crack. Lando's dragon tattoo was flashing. There was a bloody hole in it, and the hole went all the way through Lando, revealing the clouds that floated behind him. Seeing Lando like this, Han Sen realized that things were going very badly. Lando couldn't keep fighting that deified unicorn, and now there was a gaping hole in his body. If Lando was killed, then the deified unicorn's next target would be Han Senator. How could he not be scared? Lando, are you okay? Han Sen shouted at Lando, but he didn't dare go closer to the man. The deified rainbow unicorn was coming. It looked as if it had just teleported through the fabric of the universe to land on Lando. The dragon tattoo on Lando's body flashed. His hair was a bloody mess. His body suddenly jerked to the side and dodged the rainbow laser attack of the deified unicorn. But his chest was still bleeding from the hole. It wasn't healing. Lando looked calm and composed, but Han Sen could tell that his power was waning. It was still impressive that a half-deified had done battle with a deified creature for so long, though. But if he died, Han Sen would be left to face the deified unicorn alone. That would be extremely dangerous. Try to live. Use everything you have to live. Lando was floating in the air. His eyes didn't look frightened, and he didn't look at the bloody hole in his chest. He just went on pretending it didn't exist. Han Sen then remembered Lando mentioning that his body had been destroyed and he could no longer feel pain. The dragon's groan rolled across the sky, and blood showered down like rain. Lando was fighting the deified unicorn once more, but all Han Sen could see was the countless droplets of blood in the sky. They landed on the clouds and soaked into them. It was obviously Lando's dragon blood. This is pretty bad. We have to find a way to escape this place. Han Sen had tried to get out many times, but his power wasn't enough to break the substance chains that formed their invisible prison. He would have to use his super god spirit body. Otherwise, he had no chance of escaping. Why are there no other xenogeneics or races watching us? If anyone was beyond this invisible shield, I could use my eyes to just teleport outside. Han Sen was depressed. He kept looking around, but he couldn't see a single creature. Han Sen guessed that someone had locked the place down on purpose. Otherwise, something would surely have come to watch the fight. What kind of people want us dead so badly? Han Sen shouted, turning his face up to the sky. He hoped to get some useful information from Lando. No one wants you dead. We are just fighting bulls in an arena, Lando's voice echoed back. He was shockingly calm. It was as if, in addition to being unable to feel pain, he could no longer muster emotions. Han Sen understood what Lando meant immediately. They had become contestants in a sport. They weren't matadors trying to baiting bulls while onlookers cheered. They were dogs fighting in a ring. The reason that the scary deifieds hadn't personally killed them was simple. The deifieds were enjoying the fight itself. Whether Han Sen and Lando lived or died, someone would still be entertained. Their desperation to survive kept them fighting, but after realizing what was going on, Han Sen wasn't optimistic about his odds of surviving this. He wasn't optimistic at all. No one wanted to be a dog that stubbornly continued to fight a losing battle. But he had no choice. He was like a puppet on strings. That powerless feeling made Han Sen's chest made it feel like he was being crushed. Pang! In the clouds, another crack had been torn in space. Lando had just been sent flying. His body was covered in blood, and there were wounds all over him. But even so, he was still fighting. It didn't look as if he was going to give up. Lando's eyes were clear and focused. Han Sen could practically feel his desire. It was like he was saying, "You don't like this? Then use your power to defeat them." Boom. Lando had blood all over him, but he still gathered himself and charged back toward the deified unicorn. It looked as if he was going to fight until the last drop of blood was depleted. Lando would never give up. Lando's emotions were mirrored in Han Sen's heart as well. This powerless feeling made him recall everything he had been through in his life. He had so many questions. His brain was full of things he needed to have explained, but no one else could. He was looking for answers all alone. Han Sen knew no one was going to give him answers, and that was because he was too weak. Like his father, Han Yufei, he had chosen to suffer everything alone to keep his wife and children protected. And he hadn't divulged his past to anyone, not even Han Sen. And that was because Han Sen was a kid with no power. Telling Han Sen would have been useless. It would only put a greater weight upon his shoulders. A father didn't want his kids to suffer or bear a weight they were never supposed to endure. People other than Han Sen's father had different motives for withholding information. Rather than trying to protect Han Sen, they simply thought he was weak. What was the point in giving secrets to someone who was weak? It wouldn't help them at all, and it might only lead to trouble. But Han Sen had to explore these questions because when it was dark and quiet, they ran endlessly through his mind, looping over and over again. He might hate the feeling of being powerless, but there was nothing he could do about it. Weak, not respected, without the authority to choose his destiny. That was all because he wasn't strong enough. The feelings on Lando's face were also deep inside Han Sen's heart. This was why Han Sen wanted so desperately to be strong. He craved those answers. This debt. I want those F***ers to pay me back. Han Sen gnashed his teeth as the blood inside his body boiled. The killing continued, and the 7 unicorn kings couldn't suppress Han Sen any longer. He killed countless unicorns, and they screamed at Han Sen in rage. They must have really hated him. Suddenly, Han Sen saw rainbow lights pouring down from the sky. Many of the Unicorn Kings tried to use their areas to shield themselves from the light. The unicorns left exposed to the light suddenly caught on fire. The light even reached those 7 Unicorn Kings, and they burned under the radiance. Their bodies started to fade. Oh no, Han Sen thought. He saw the black unicorn scream to the sky. A vacillating area of darkness had formed outside the creature's body. Suddenly, it was coming for Han Sen. It now moved so much faster than it had before. So much faster than Han Sen was capable of moving. Han Sen wanted to use his evil god beast soul, but it was too late. He lifted his ghost teeth knife and thunder god spike. He positioned them in front of his chest to block the incoming strike of the black unicorn. Pang! Han Sen's body shot away like an iron ball being fired from a cannon. Blood filled his mouth, and he heaved it out in a long spray. His chest felt as if it had exploded. When the deified unicorn's power had buffed the Unicorn Kings, the black unicorn's speed and power had increased. Han Sen's second-tier jade skin wasn't enough to fight it. Before Han Sen's body came to a stop, 2 white lights blazed from the white Unicorn King's eyes. They broke Han Sen's body. Han Sen's body exploded like water, but he quickly recoalesced. Han Sen's body regained its familiar features once again, but Han Sen's face looked very pale. He had his original Water King body to save his life, but he was still injured. Now that the Unicorn Kings had been buffed up by the deified unicorn, Han Sen was no longer a match for them. The deified unicorn's buff is so scary. If he did that to me, how powerful might I become? Han Sen's face cycled through expressions. Now the purple and gold Unicorn Kings were coming Han Sen's way. Their scary area powers created fusiform shields. The different colored shields had different powers. The next second, the purple and gold Unicorn Kings hit Han Sen, crushing his body. The moon doppelganger exploded. Han Sen's true self appeared on the other side. Without hesitating, Han Sen turned into a blood shadow and fired himself into the eyes of a Duke-class unicorn. Pang! Han Sen had only just entered the eyes of that Duke-class unicorn when a red light fell on the unicorn, bursting the creature's head into bloody chunks. Han Sen didn't stop. He teleported into another Duke unicorn's eye. Pang! The result was exactly the same. That Duke-class unicorn's skull was broken again, but this time, it was via a black light. Han Sen kept trying to move around with his eye powers, but he was discovered every time. Without an ounce of hesitation, the Unicorn Kings merrily killed the unicorns Han Sen fled into. 7 Unicorn Kings whinnied into the sky, and many of the other unicorns turned around to run away. Clearly, they understood Han Sen's eye skill, and they weren't going to give him a chance to use it anymore. Seeing all this, many dukes and nobles sighed. It is game over for Han Sen and Lando. Ordinary people often sympathized with an underdog. Han Sen and Lando were the best of their level, but now people were sympathizing with them. Lando was already injured, so it didn't look as if he would last much longer. Han Sen's eye skills had been his best chance of survival at this point. If he couldn't use those eye skills, his end wouldn't be any prettier than Lando's. Close, the table is set. Your expectations of that traitor were too high, it appears. Dragon 1 sipped tea from his teacup and smiled coldly. It isn't the end just yet. It's still difficult to determine who the winner will be. Close continued to smile. What? Does that traitor still have a few tricks up his sleeve? Dragon 1 frowned as he looked at Lando, who was still in battle. Who knows? It's difficult to say, isn't it? Close said in a mysterious tone of voice. Pang! Another big explosion rocked the battle. Lando was sent flying away again. By this point, his injuries were very dire. There were 3 bloody holes in his chest, plus countless wounds and scrapes across his body. He was bleeding all over, and his body was beginning to run out of blood to spill. His injuries were so serious that any other half-deified would be immobilized by the pain. In their agony, they literally screamed themselves to death. But Lando still moved as if he didn't have any pain. He just looked a bit pale. The rainbow unicorn was coming for him again. Its eyes were like pieces of glass that reflected the entire universe. The rainbow light was headed for Lando again. In its eyes, it looked as if it held the very essence of life and death. Lando's body danced in the sky, but he no longer had the strength to dodge the attacks that came his way. The scary rainbow light was going to perforate his head. Everyone thought this was the moment Lando would be killed. No matter how strong the body of a dragon might be, it couldn't be revived if the head was annihilated. Only a very few of the dragon could ever be fully reborn. Lando suddenly groaned like a dragon. But when Han Sen looked at him a little closer, he could see that the groan didn't actually come from Lando's mouth. It came from his back. The purple draconic tattoo on Lando's back had started moving. It grew, spreading to cover his entire back. It glowed with a purple light. Purple air hissed out of the dragon tattoo, making it appear as if the dragon tattoo was a living entity. Lando was in the air. He threw his fist in a punch toward the rainbow light. The purple dragon tattoo shone on his back, and the purple air wrapped around his arm in a shroud. It was like the spine of a dragon was wrapped around that launched fist. A purple dragon came out of the fist and hit the unicorn's rainbow light. The two powers hit each other inside the clouds, and suddenly, a hole was torn right through space. A giant black hole appeared there and started sucking everything inside. But there was no explosion. Huh? Isn't that the demon hell dragon tattoo from Dragon 2? Why would it be on the traitor? Dragon 1 stared at the purple tattoo on Lando's back. The demon hell dragon tattoo has very special powers. The legends say it comes from Dragon 2 of the prior generation. The same Dragon 2 who was Lando's master. Dragon 2 created it in the hope of challenging Dragon 1. It was a shame he was beheaded by his student before he could use it, Close said with a smile. It looks like the demon hell dragon tattoo wasn't destroyed. That traitor took it for himself. Very good, very good. Instead of being shocked, Dragon 1 was actually happy. He looked at the demon hell dragon tattoo with excitement. The last generation's Dragon 2 wanted to obtain Dragon 1's seat. He used his deified body as a base and refined his blood into a tattoo that became known as the demon hell dragon tattoo. It was quite the treasure. Not many dragons knew about that treasure, and no second dragon wanted to try it because it was too painful. Using his own body and his dragon blood to create the demon hell dragon tattoo meant that Dragon 2 put himself into a smithy's furnace to be forged. That pain wasn't something that just anyone could endure. It was like taking a trip to hell, where you would have to endure endless torture. That was why it was called Demon Hell Dragon Tattoo. Dragon 2 of the prior generation suffered for 10,000 years to create this treasure that was called the Demon Hell Dragon Tattoo. He had planned to use it to rise within the dragon ranks. When that Dragon 2 died, the other dragons thought the Demon Hell Dragon Tattoo was destroyed. After all, the Demon Hell Dragon Tattoo was created by Dragon 2. It was a part of his body. But no one thought the Demon Hell Dragon Tattoo had actually ended up on Lando's body. Not only that, but he could apparently control it. Seeing the power of the Demon Hell Dragon Tattoo, it was obviously something that had reached deified status. It could create substance chains. Lando himself hadn't yet become deified, but already he could make the Demon Hell Dragon Tattoo manifest in an incredibly powerful way. If he became deified and was able to use the full power of the Demon Hell Dragon Tattoo, the power he could unleash would be even scarier. You knew Lando had the Demon Hell Dragon Tattoo? Dragon 1 asked, looking at Close. How was Lando able to kill his teacher if he had the Demon Hell Dragon Tattoo? Are you so naive that you think a half-deified can easily slay a deified? Close asked, his voice grating. Dragon 1 wasn't angry. He laughed and said, Good. Today I will claim the Demon Hell Dragon Tattoo, too. Then, the grudge will be over. What? Despite being a dragon, you have no confidence in what the Demon Hell Dragon Tattoo can achieve. Close licked his lips as he spoke. That tattoo is strong, but Uncle Dragon 2 had only created the prototype. It isn't entirely finished, and you're underestimating the power of the Tianxia unicorns. They aren't just ordinary deified creatures, Dragon 1 said with certainty. Worry suddenly passed over Close's face. He looked at the deified unicorn and Lando. Han Sen was getting chased by the unicorn kings. The herd of unicorns was fleeing as fast as they could, so he couldn't use his eye ability to escape. He frowned. The gold unicorn king pursued Han Sen relentlessly. The beast clearly wanted to end him. You won't treat me with any respect unless I show my teeth, huh? Han Sen thought angrily. He gathered up all the power he had. Then he lifted the Thunder God spike and thrust it toward the gold unicorn's fusiform area. Dong! The area and the Thunder God spike clashed against each other, unleashing a scary fountain of sparks. The impact ripped the fabric of space. Han Sen felt as if his arms were about to be shaken loose, and his entire body was pushed back by the force of that fearsome power. Han Sen held tightly to the Thunder God spike. His jade skin power was running at max capacity, but it still wasn't enough to repel the gold unicorn's power. Han Sen used all the might he could muster, and it felt like he was pulling power all the way from his toenails. The Blood Pulse Sutra was boiling inside Han Sen's body, and his blood roared through his veins like a runaway train. Boom! Suddenly, a force shook Han Sen from the inside out. He could sense an invisible cogwheel in front of him. His body was the center of the cogwheel, the big red cogwheel. The Blood Pulse Sutra is going to become king class. Han Sen was shocked. He hadn't expected the Blood Pulse Sutra to level up without an enormous amount of conscious effort on Han Sen's part. The Blood Pulse Sutra's self-cogwheel started to spin. It did so in unison with other cogwheels of the universe. Because Han Sen's body was in motion, he couldn't open the Universal Core Hall's door. But after the Blood Pulse Sutra's self-cogwheel moved, Han Sen noticed something strange. The other self-cogwheels that Han Sen had spun could push the universal cogwheels around them. Jadeskin's cogwheel could push 7, and the Dongxian Sutra's cogwheel could push many. The Blood Pulse Sutra, though, couldn't push any of the nearby universal cogwheels. Somehow, though, Han Sen still sensed that many universal cogwheels were connected to it. Han Sen didn't understand what was going on, and he had no idea what the area power of the Blood Pulse Sutra might be. When he activated his mutant blood area, no actual area powers were emitted. And yet, his fitness increased a lot. Fighting the Unicorn Kings wasn't all that difficult for him now, and he was now moving quickly enough to evade their attacks. Pang! Han Sen spun the Thunder God spike in his hand and jabbed it into the gold unicorn's area. Then Han Sen leaped up, dodging another unicorn's laser light. Lando's demon hell dragon tattoo was getting brighter. The scary purple dragon air rising from the tattoo was condensing into substance chains. It became a giant purple dragon upon Lando's body. The Tianxia unicorn's face looked grim. The rainbow colors in its eyes flashed repeatedly, as if the universe was dying and being reborn inside them. Lando roared, and a giant purple dragon shook everything around them. It looked as if he was going to swallow the entire world. The light in the Tianxia unicorn's eyes deepened, combining until all the colors had mixed into a uniform gray. The gray light shot out, heading for the raging purple dragon. When the gray light and giant purple dragon collided, the whole world seemed to go quiet. The powers collided in near silence, and for a moment, nothing seemed to happen. A small vortex appeared between them, then began to expand, growing until it was exerting a powerful drag on everything in sight. It was like space itself was falling into an abyss. Han Sen and the Unicorn Kings were still engaged in battle when Han Sen felt the vortex pulling him toward Lando and the Tianxia unicorn. And Han Sen wasn't the only one affected. The Unicorn Kings, the fleeing unicorn herd, and even the clouds around them were all being sucked into the vortex. Once they fell inside, they vanished. Han Sen cast his own powers, but he couldn't fight off that force of suction that was dragging him in. Not even a half-deified king unicorn could escape it, so the chances of Han Sen escaping it were nil. Seeing that he was about to be sucked into the dark swirl, Han Sen prepared to return to the sanctuary. Just before he activated his power, though, he felt someone grab his arm and pull him back from the abyss. Han Sen raised his head and saw that it was Lando who had grabbed him. Pang! Han Sen heard the sound of something breaking. Under the tremendous power of the vortex, the invisible walls composed of substance chains started to crumble. The walls shattered like glass and began to fall into the abyss. Go! Lando shouted. The arm that was holding Han Sen swung as Lando hurled Han Sen away from the vortex. In the next second, Han Sen found himself thousands of miles away, and he was still flying. As he flew back, Han Sen heard a distant shout. The gray light inside the Tianxia unicorn looked like a laser that could destroy the whole universe. It was being fired at Lando again. A dragon roar shook space itself, and Lando's whole body became a giant purple dragon that struck the gray light. Han Sen watched as the gray light pierced straight through the giant dragon body. The huge form suddenly dissolved into purple smoke. Lando's body was sent flying, still trailing streamers of that smoke. His body was twitching spasmodically. He was dying. Han Sen was shocked. He thought Lando had thrown him away because the man believed he could defeat the Tianxia unicorn. But now, it seemed as if that wasn't the case. Why is he doing this? He doesn't seem like the sort of guy who would care about the lives of others. Why would he save me moments before losing? Han Sen kept thinking about it, but he was unable to understand. Why should I care? He has nothing to do with me anyway. Han Sen summoned his power and added to the force of Lando's throw, boosting himself away from there. Lando's body was floating amidst the clouds. The light of the demon hell dragon tattoo grew faint. It required a life force to remain active. Lando's life force was fading. He couldn't support the demon hell dragon tattoo any longer, and the tattoo fell from his body. In the end, I still couldn't attain that last step. Lando could see the Tianxia unicorn coming for him. He could see the unicorn's eyes glowing gray. A powerful gray beam came from its eyes. Lando looked so calm, though, and it was as if he didn't care whether he lived or died. It was as if he wouldn't feel any pain, and he wouldn't. He quietly closed his eyes, peacefully waiting for that final moment to come. To him, death would be a sweet relief. Pang! The gray beam broke the sky, but it didn't break Lando's body. Something tightened around Lando's arms. Someone had suddenly pulled him away. The gray beam went right by his body and into the sky, missing him entirely. The power roared past him, an incredible display of strength. Lando opened his eyes and instantly froze. The person who had grabbed him was Han Sen, the same person that he had just hurled out of the area. Why did you come back? I came back to ask you why you would save me, Han Sen said casually. Han Sen wasn't afraid of evil, but he was afraid of kindness. If someone took advantage of him, he'd always pay them back threefold. But if he owed someone a favor, he never knew quite how to return it. While Han Sen was fleeing the area, he suddenly realized something. The invisible shield that confined them had been broken, but the scary deified who had placed the shield was still around somewhere. If Han Sen couldn't sort out that little problem, escaping might be impossible whether the invisible wall was there or not. The hostile deified probably wouldn't let them go. Save you? I'm not nice enough to do that. I just didn't want my prize to get stolen, Lando said, rolling his eyes. Lando's body was riddled with injuries, but despite that, he didn't feel pain. He didn't feel anything. He just looked pale. I see.
Han Sen nodded.
He hadn't really thought that Lando was saving him just to be magnanimous. This answer made sense. While they were talking, the Tianxia unicorn had turned to head toward them again. It knew Lando was dying as well. It flew over to them, but it didn't finish Lando off. The creature wanted to revel in its victory. How about we make a deal? Han Sen suggested, looking at Lando. I'm dying. What sort of deal could we possibly strike? Lando asked wryly. If we kill this unicorn together, how about we both live? Han Sen said, pointing at the Tianxia unicorn. We can live. At least for a while, Lando replied emotionlessly. Then you and I can kill it together. If we succeed, will you let me go? Han Sen asked, looking at Lando. Hearing Han Sen's question, Dragon 1 raised an eyebrow in scorn. Is this guy insane? How can he say something so ridiculous at a time like this? Everyone who heard Han Sen's words shared Dragon 1's opinion. Lando was heavily injured and on the precipice of death. Although Han Sen wasn't injured, he was just a second-tier king. He was far from being deified. Two people like them working together to slay a deified was like two ants teaming up to take down an elephant. Has the shock of battle ruined Han Sen's mind? He actually thinks they can kill the Tianxia unicorn? That is so pathetic. It proves that any person can become delusional if they're desperate enough. This is no different than seeing the mirage of an oasis while crawling through a desert with no water, about to die of thirst. Many elites sighed. Seeing the desperation of the two young elites was saddening. Some of the viewers even sympathized with them. Unless they became deified, they wouldn't control their own fates. All the elite kings and half-deifieds felt a pang of empathy in their hearts as they looked at Han Sen and Lando. What was happening to Han Sen and Lando today could end up happening to them tomorrow. There was no guarantee that they wouldn't encounter a cruel deified being by chance. Sure, Lando answered simply. He just nodded and looked at Han Sen. This is so pathetic. Lando was invincible against others of the same level. He is the man who slew his master. And now he has fallen this far, to put stock in such a ridiculous hope. Dragon One, seeing all this, looked full of hatred and disdain. Close frowned, too. He didn't know much about Lando. Although Lando joined the Destroyed, he was a very solitary individual by nature. Plus, he wasn't really one of the Destroyed. They didn't have much inclination to associate with the disgraced dragon. But even if he didn't understand Lando well, he knew that anyone who could slay a deified must possess a considerable amount of mental fortitude. Lando's mental health shouldn't have deteriorated like so, even under that sort of pressure. But Lando seemed to accept Han Sen's ludicrous suggestion. Clearly, the strain had gotten to the man. That was why he put hope in something so silly. Death is a very interesting thing. No matter how strong a person might be, they will always appear small at the hands of death.
Close sight.
He was the same, too. Even though he was a deified, he would still fight to live for the sake of living. Then we have a deal, Han Sen said, his face completely serious. What do you want to do? Lando asked Han Sen with a curious look. Lando didn't actually believe Han Sen could do what he had suggested. Lando was just curious about what Han Sen was planning. In fact, Lando had always been curious about Han. Senator Han Sen was like his complete opposite. Lando's life had never given him many good memories to look back on. He stayed alive more out of habit than anything. Han Sen was different. Han Sen was a man who possessed a fierce desire to live. Han Sen would employ any method necessary, including betraying his promise by trying to escape Lando in order to survive. But the moment that Han Sen came back to save him, Lando began to wonder just who Han Sen really was. Somewhere in his heart, Lando had the suspicion that he had misjudged Han Sen in some fundamental way. Han Sen didn't answer Lando. He wasn't looking at the Tianxia unicorn, though, which was hovering over them like some victorious warrior. Han Sen helped Lando get back to his feet. He reached out his hand and placed it down on Lando's forehead. He looked like a priest that was about to bless his congregation. Han Sen calmly looked at Lando. In a very calm voice, he slowly said, "I, Han Sen, by the name of all the gods, grant you, Lando, holy power forever. Open the door of destiny." Hearing what Han Sen had just said, Dragon One and Close almost spat out the tea in their mouths. The dukes and the nobles that watched the stream stared at their screens. They looked at Han Sen as if they were watching someone retarded. At that moment, Han Sen's actions were no longer ridiculous. Now they were simply idiotic. The approach of death must have made him lose his mind. Even if they sympathized with Han Sen earlier, this was too much. This is crazy. By the name of all the gods? Han Sen must have gone insane. This is so funny. I think I overestimated him. He was someone impressive before, but I cannot believe his will is this weak. He has clearly gone crazy. Haha, by the name of all the gods. This is so funny. This is the funniest joke I have ever heard. Dragon One laughed so much that tears were welling up in his eyes. After hearing what Han Sen said, even the Tianxia unicorn looked amused. Mirth crossed over its horse-like face, and it whinnied in a way that sounded a lot like a human chuckle. So many elites populated the Geno universe. Even if they were deified elites, they wouldn't call upon the gods for aid. Using the names of the gods for help was something no one would do, not even sacred leader in his time of power. But Han Sen, as a second-tier king, had dared to call on the gods. It made everyone think this was all a comedy. If he's the master of all celestial beings, then I'm the daddy of all gods, said a king-class elite with a tremendous belly laugh. Many other elites were saying similar things. They enjoyed mocking others, and with what was happening on the video stream, it was too easy. It was like two crazy people putting on a comedy skit. But in the next second, their smiles froze. A red light appeared in Han Sen's hand, and that light looked like the seed of fire itself. The red glow immediately lit up Lando's body, and his entire form burst to life with wild red flames. At the same time this happened, a scary presence appeared. It exploded out of Lando's body like an erupting volcano. In seconds, Lando's injured body recovered. The demon hell dragon tattoo on his back, which had just now looked dim and lifeless, was now bursting with a purple light. A purple dragon's shadow came to life on Lando's back, and it looked even shinier than when Lando had used his powers earlier. All of the stream's viewers stared at their screens, motionless. No one was quite sure what had happened, but Dragon One's eyes opened wide. He could barely believe what he was seeing. There were 2 scars on Lando's back. They were the wounds he incurred when his wings were ripped off. The legends said he was cursed when his teacher tore them off and that they would never grow back. But at that moment, bones sprouted from his back and flesh crawled over them, creating new purple dragon wings. As the wings grew from Lando's back, the demon hell dragon tattoo grew wings as well. Previously, the demon hell dragon tattoo had only been half finished. Now, however, Dragon One sensed that there were no longer any flaws to the tattoo's composition. The presence that radiated from Lando was enough to make people tremble. Seeing a deified treasure of this power was very, very rare. This is impossible. The demon hell dragon tattoo is finished. Dragon One was shocked. He stared at Lando with wide eyes. But he wasn't really looking at Lando. He wasn't looking at the demon hell dragon tattoo, either. He was looking at Han Sen, who had his hand on Lando's forehead like some kind of ancient progenitor of gods. In truth, everyone tuned into the broadcast was looking at Han Sen in utter shock. Even if they didn't know enough to recognize the changes to the demon hell dragon tattoo, they could feel that Lando was changing into something grander. The Geno universe was frozen as all the creatures watched the stream in shock. At this moment, those 2 figures were at the center of the entire universe. One of them was releasing a scary presence, and the other one was like the father of all gods. He stood over Lando like some holy deity, giving his believer a blessing. Han Sen felt so happy about this. He wasn't some sort of god, and he didn't have a holy power to imbue Lando with. He was just using the Blood Pulse Sutra's area. Han Sen hadn't been sure what to do with it before. He didn't know why the Blood Pulse Sutra's area couldn't trigger the movement of any other universal cogwheels. When he touched one of the unicorns, however, he realized what the Blood Pulse Sutra's area was for. Blood Pulse Sutra's self-cogwheel couldn't move any other universal cogwheel, no matter how small or light it might be. However, it could push self-cogwheels. Yes, the self-cogwheels of people. The Blood Pulse Sutra's cogwheel connected with the self-cogwheels of others. Han Sen used his Blood Pulse Sutra's self-cogwheel to connect with Lando's self-cogwheel. He pushed his self-cogwheel and used its power to affect Lando's self-cogwheel. He wasn't simply pushing a self-cogwheel to release more power, though. His action activated Lando's blood on a deeper level. The Blood Pulse Sutra's cogwheel wouldn't make creatures strong, but it could modify the flaws of a creature's genes, and it could even activate hidden genes. How deep the effect could go depended on the hidden genes of the creature in question. Iron or could be forged into steel, but it couldn't be transformed into gold. In the same way, the Blood Pulse Sutra's power could correct a creature's flaws and help it develop according to its nature. Iron, silver, or gold, it all depended on the creature. Han Sen's Blood Pulse Sutra only provided refinement and aid. From an outside perspective, though, it looked like the Blood Pulse Sutra was speeding up a creature's evolution. It was like if a land-dwelling creature was forced to live in the ocean. If their genes had a potential that would be useful for water, then after 1 billion years of evolution, they might grow lungs like a fish. The Blood Pulse Sutra, however, could speed up that entire process. A change that would normally require thousands of years and countless generations might now happen in seconds. Of course, everything was dependent on a person's genes and hidden powers. The Blood Pulse Sutra couldn't turn stone into a clump of gold, but the Blood Pulse Sutra, when used on Lando, provided fairly amazing results. It worked 100 times better than Han Sen had expected. Han Sen thought it might help push Lando's self-cogwheel to the max, returning the man's body to optimal condition. Lando's self-cogwheel was very heavy. It took all of Han Sen's strength to push Lando's self-cogwheel to spin a little faster. But who would have guessed that the speed of Lando's self-cogwheel would begin to increase on its own? Even the demon hell dragon tattoo changed, as well. This surprised Han Sen because the Blood Pulse Sutra's first-tier power was limited. Han Sen had just started using the area, so pushing a king's self-cogwheel was presumably the best he could do. The demon hell dragon tattoo was deified. According to Han Sen's general understanding of how the Blood Pulse Sutra worked, he shouldn't have been able to push it. But when Lando's self-cogwheel accelerated, the demon hell dragon tattoo magically changed, too. The flaws that had previously plagued the demon hell dragon tattoo had now vanished, and the tattoo had become perfect. The scariest thing was that Lando's genes had also been perfected. He was now on the verge of becoming deified, and the demon hell dragon tattoo was beginning to influence Lando's body. Han Sen went rigid with shock as the demon hell dragon tattoo's power surged through Lando. The dragon pushed through the final wall that stopped him, and he suddenly generated a substance chain. He had become deified. Countless people and creatures across the Geno universe looked at Han Sen, who was touching Lando's forehead like some ancient deity. A moment later, Lando's presence combined with the demon hell dragon tattoo. It rushed out into the sky as a scary substance chain came down on Lando. In front of Han Sen, dark sinews of power waved and thrashed. The substance chains were breaking space, and Lando looked like some heavenly being of power. Everyone's brain felt empty. They couldn't believe this. They were all thinking numbly, how did Lando become deified? Is Han Sen really a father of gods? This can't be real. As Wang Yuhang stared at the screen, it looked like his eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. Many other people were having similar reactions. Countless elites of all sorts of different races had their eyes glued to the screen in disbelief. There were not many deifieds in the Geno universe, and normal people would never have a chance to see this process. Most people had never even seen a deified being, other than occasional pictures on the internet. Even with the internet, it was very rare to watch a person become deified. If there was footage of such events, it was guaranteed to be carefully hidden and protected by the rulers of that race. Without the correct authorization, you wouldn't be allowed to watch a video of someone leveling up to become deified. Right now, though, they were watching someone become deified in a way that had never even dreamed of being possible. Han Sen had brought a heavily injured half-deified to his feet and forced him to become deified. If they hadn't watched it with their own eyes, no one would have believed it to be true. Even as they watched, many viewers had difficulty accepting what their eyes were telling them. They thought this had to be some sort of mistake. Maybe they were seeing things incorrectly. Even all the deifieds across the universe stared at their screens with rapt attention. Their mouths hung open in shock. They had worked hard for years and years to become deified. They had overcome arduous odds, dancing on the brink of death multiple times in their bid to evolve. But Han Sen had just nonchalantly touched Lando's forehead, and suddenly, the injured dragon had become deified. Han Sen was just a king, too. How were they supposed to believe this was possible? Fake. It must be fake. Dragon 1 gritted his teeth. He couldn't believe Lando had become deified just like that. Close was struggling with the idea, as well. No one with a brain could just accept the impossible thing they were seeing. Han Sen was only a king, and a low-tier king at that. How could he elevate someone else to deified? Even if a deified elite had managed to bring someone else to deified, no one would believe it. And Han Sen was just a king. Pang. The Tianxia unicorn didn't believe that Lando had ascended, either. It attacked. Its scary substance chains combined to become a gray light, and the light shot forward, punching through the universe like a razor-sharp arrow to reach Lando. The demon hell dragon tattoo writhed around Lando. He took a step to get in front of Han Sen and punched toward the gray beam of light. Substance chains leaped from his fist, combining into a scary purple demon dragon. It roared and went for the gray light. This time, the gray light was unable to break the purple demon dragon. The gray and purple colors collided with a deafening boom. A black hole formed in space, and that black hole had gray and purple powers swirling inside it. It looked like a spinning Tai Chi symbol. Roar. A dragon's roar shocked the sky. The purple color within the black hole completely overwhelmed the gray, and then an enraged dragon emerged from the black hole. It flapped its wings and soared over to the Tianxia unicorn. The Tianxia unicorn was stunned. Its substance chains frantically withdrew and circled around the unicorn. The beast tried to protect itself, but when the purple dragon struck the protective shield, the shield snapped in two. The blow tossed the Tianxia unicorn a few thousand miles away before it came to a stop. Lando really did become deified. People watched the stream, their minds blank. Their brains failed to function. There was no longer any doubt about the fact that Lando had become a deified. Only a deified elite could fight a deified xenogeneic one-on-one like that. Now that they knew that Lando was deified, all the creatures in the Geno universe looked at Han Sen with fire in their eyes. He had brought a half-deified person up to deified. No matter what level they were, Han Sen was a god in their eyes. No, it was more like he was the father of the gods. He can produce gods. Many half-deifieds stared at Han Sen's image, their eyes flaming with the lust for power. King-class elites required a 9th-tier area to become half-deified, but after suffering for all that time, they had the hope that they would somehow live long enough to achieve their real goal. Even powerful half-deifieds could only hope for the best. Taking the final step to become deified was very difficult. It could easily take a few centuries to accomplish. Few races knew how many half-deified they had, for many died when they failed to become deified. Talent, resources, fate, luck, effort, successful evolution required all 5. Many half-deified warriors had become hopeless over the years, but today, their hope had been rekindled. They would no longer have to risk their lives. They wouldn't have to fight and plunder rare treasures from across the universe. They only needed the hand of one man to become deified. Just thinking about it filled them with nervous energy. They all wanted a piece of the Han Sen pie. They wanted him to bless them and make them deified. The kings and dukes, in the meanwhile, were thinking that if Han Sen could elevate a half-deified, then surely leveling up someone of a lesser rank would be easy. Thinking of this, all the creatures in the universe looked at Han Sen with burning eyes. They were like a bunch of men who hadn't had sex in 30 years, but they were now seeing a naked little woman. Boom! A scary power shook the image on their screens, snapping them out of their dreams. Lando was fighting the Tianxia unicorn again. This time, Lando wasn't suppressed by the Tianxia unicorn. Instead, he was the one pushing the Tianxia unicorn around. Purple dragon substance chains flashed across the sky, overpowering the Tianxia unicorn's substance chains. The Tianxia unicorn was quite strong when compared to other deified beings. It wasn't smart, but its raw power put it above the majority of deified xenogeneics. Lando had just become deified, and yet he was now dominating the Tianxia unicorn. All the creatures looked at Han Sen with even hungrier eyes. They wanted to swallow him up. In truth, the reason Lando had become so strong when he became deified had nothing to do with Han Senator. It was because he had the demon hell dragon tattoo. That was what was giving Lando so much strength. With the demon hell dragon tattoo on his back, Lando had a might that equaled 2 deified creatures. The demon hell dragon tattoo wasn't an ordinary deified treasure, and it made Lando extraordinarily strong. But only high-ranking dragons knew the significance of the tattoo. Everyone else believed that Lando's strength was due to Han Sen's help. So, they all wanted to get to know Han Sen and earn his blessing. A scream broke the sky. The Tianxia unicorn's horn had been chipped. Godlike blood spilled out in a heavy stream, and the creature looked badly injured. Lando went after the Tianxia unicorn with demonic fervor. His form looked like a purple demon dragon as he fought the Tianxia unicorn. His substance chains ripped and tore space every time they moved. Deified blood rained down over the clouds, dyeing everything a deep crimson. When the battle finally quieted down, the chaos of the video stream started to resolve into discernible images once again. Many creatures leaned forward, watching as Lando rode the bloody Tianxia unicorn out of the clouds. The Tianxia unicorn looked as sad as if its daddy had just died. That fight was destined to become a legend in the Geno universe. Before the day was out, the battle was being discussed across the universe. It was amazing that Lando had defeated and tamed the Tianxia unicorn, but Han Sen's actions had stolen the show. Han Sen had somehow turned Lando into a deified mid-fight. Before that day, Han Sen was just a king of little fame. In the vast universe filled with strange and incredible powers, he wasn't very special. If he hadn't killed Bai Yi and ended up being chased by the Extreme King, many people wouldn't have known who he was. Even if he was a fugitive, he was still just a king. Few people would have said that there was anything special about him. But after this fight, he became known as the leader of all gods. On any other day, the fact that such a name was used to refer to a mere king would have been very strange. Some wise guys even gave Han Sen the title Daddy of Gods. But that title was only used in secret. If any deified heard it, they probably would have found it annoying. No one wanted to jeopardize their own life by irritating a deified. Regardless of that, the battle made Han Sen very famous. Everyone in the Geno universe knew about him now, and so no one treated him as a measly king anymore. He wasn't deified, but most people thought he was more mysterious than a deified. There was nothing he could do about it, though. After all, he had been able to produce a deified. He didn't earn the name Daddy of Gods for nothing. Recent events had clearly established that he was different from most people. Many deifieds and the leaders of the higher races knew that Han Sen couldn't just flip a switch to make someone deified, though. They suspected that there were more factors involved in Lando becoming deified. But they still had a keen interest in Han Senator. Even if Han Sen couldn't produce a deified, he had undoubtedly influenced Lando's evolution. They wanted to know what kind of power Han Sen had wielded. Even if that power couldn't create a deified, it seemed that he could somehow kickstart the evolution process. And any power that could aid the development of half-deifieds would be highly sought after by the races of the Geno universe. Brother Dragon 1, it looks like I won the bet, Close said, looking at Dragon 1. We dragons stay true to our word. Every dragon will now depart the Tianxia system. Dragon 1 grunted. He commanded the big turtle to depart. Close wasn't interested in watching Dragon 1 and the rest leave. He flew away to chase after Lando and Han Sen. But now, Han Sen was worth far more than the bounty offered by the Extreme King. Although it didn't seem possible, if Han Sen truly could make deified elites, then he had just become priceless. Han Sen and Lando rode the Tianxia unicorn through the blue clouds. The wounds on the Tianxia unicorn were almost healed, but the broken horn wouldn't grow back for some time. The Tianxia unicorn was very sad, and he wasn't happy to have Han Sen sitting on him. But he didn't want to disobey Lando's commands, either. So, he was a very grumpy animal at that moment. Han Sen jumped off of the unicorn's back and looked up at Lando. Per the terms of our agreement, can I go now? You can't go, Lando said while looking calm. You're going to break your promise? Han Sen frowned. He had suspected that this might happen, though, so he wasn't terribly surprised. But if Lando really had decided to hold him against his will, it would make Han Sen's life very difficult. Close chuckled darkly and flew over to them. He came before Han Sen and said, "A promise is nothing to him. Don't you know he killed his own teacher?" The man's 3 heads marked him as one of the destroyed. Han Sen could immediately tell that Close was a deified elite, but he ignored him. He continued looking at Lando, waiting for his answer. Although Han Sen had prepared himself for the possibility of Lando breaking his promise, he didn't think Lando was the type of person who would do that. Their personalities might be very different, but Han Sen couldn't help but feel that he shared something in common with Lando. Lando, good job. Not only did you catch Han Sen, but you also became deified. And you tamed the Tianxia unicorn in the process. When we return home, I will definitely put it to good use. Close cast a substance chain toward Han Sen to tie him up. But the substance chain didn't land on Han Senator. A purple, dragon-like substance chain flew forward to protect Han Senator. It swallowed Close's power. Close's eyes widened, then suddenly narrowed. He looked at Lando and asked, "Lando, what are you doing?" "I promised him that I would let him leave this place," Lando said quietly. "Fine. You go on your way, and I will take him back myself," Close said with a frown. "I promised to let him leave here." Lando's face remained unmoved. His expression was as emotionless as a block of stone. "Not bad. Not bad. Our promise was for me to leave here, not die here or be taken by someone else." Han Sen laughed and clapped his hands. "Lando, are you going to betray our ruler?" Black and white substance chains had begun to rise around Close's body. I'm just keeping a promise I made, Lando said. You must think this through clearly. If you let Han Sen leave this place, then you are a traitor to the destroyed. You know how we deal with traitors. Close smiled threateningly. He went on to say, plus, the dragon hate your guts now. And if you betray us, the destroyed, do you think any other race in this universe will accept you? Men that go with the flow are smart. You aren't a naive teenager. Destroying your future for the sake of a single promise isn't a good idea. I'm not going to stop you, though. If you want to leave, you may. And you can take what you've earned with you. But the prisoner is mine. I will take him back. It's none of your business, and you will have kept your promise. Close reached out his hand to grab Han Sen. I told you that he is leaving here. Whoever tries to stop him will be trying to stop me, Lando said. His eyes locked on Close. Close's expression turned grim as he stared back at Lando. He coldly said, Lando, do you think that being deified will let you do whatever you want? You should know that a single deified means nothing to the destroyed. We can still have you killed with ease. The destroyed might be able to kill me, but you can't. You can leave now, okay? Lando said, his voice as hard as granite. Close's face was frozen. Lando's words had made him angry. He knew that he wasn't weak, but Lando had the demon hell dragon tattoo and the Tianxia unicorn on his side. If he fought Lando now, it would be 1 versus 3. He couldn't win against those odds. I hope you don't regret this decision you have made, Close snarled. Then he turned around and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Now that he has left, have you really become a traitor to the destroyed? Han Sen asked with a blink. This wouldn't be the first time I've become a traitor. Lando's face seemed to be devoid of emotion. He turned the Tianxia unicorn to continue heading out of the system. You don't look like someone who would become a traitor. Can you tell me more about your past? Han Sen asked with a look of great curiosity. He was still sitting behind Lando on the Tianxia unicorn as they made their way out of the system. He thought there had to be more to the story of Lando slaying his teacher. With Lando's power, assassinating a deified would have been incredibly difficult. Plus, there shouldn't have been a reason for him to kill his own mentor. By doing so, he only would have gained the animosity of his own race and the distrust of others. There was no benefit. You are wrong. I really am a traitor that killed his teacher, Lando said emotionlessly. Can you tell me why? Han Sen asked. Lando hesitated. Han Sen noticed and quickly said, I don't believe that you would kill your teacher for no reason. But if you don't want to tell me about it, that's fine. I won't push. Han Sen's strategy of backing off the subject worked. Although it took Lando some time to respond, he eventually said, It's not like I'm trying to keep the story a secret. It's just that if I told people, they wouldn't believe me anyway. I would believe you, Han Sen said with certainty. If I told you I was my teacher, would you believe it? Lando asked, turning around to stare into Han Sen's eyes. I'm not sure what to make of that statement. What do you mean? Han Sen asked. Lando faced forward again. They continued to fly forward for a long, quiet moment. Han Sen's curiosity was amped up even more. He was afraid that Lando might refuse to discuss the subject any further, but fortunately, Lando again broke the silence. You saw the demon hell dragon tattoo on my back, did you not? You know what that is? I don't know. Han Sen shook his head. Isn't that some kind of treasure? Lando explained the basics of what the demon hell dragon tattoo was and how it worked. Then he said, People think my master worked hard for 10,000 years to obtain that demon hell dragon tattoo. But that isn't what happened at all. He found an easier way. Upon hearing this, Han Sen felt a shiver pass through him. He had an intuition about where this story was going. Lando went on to say, he tried it before, but the pain was too much for even a deified being to endure. It wasn't long before he gave up on the idea, but he really wanted Dragon One's position, and he needed more power in order to claim it. So, he came up with a plan. And that is why I'm here today. In order to be successfully created and wielded, the Demon Hell Dragon tattoo needed a body as a base. But Dragon 2 found a way to circumvent the need to endure that pain. He used his genes to create a duplicate of himself. Then he set that clone to practicing with the Demon Hell Dragon tattoo. When the process was complete, he planned to take the tattoo for himself. Because the clone had been created from his own genes, there wouldn't have been any compatibility issues. It would have been just like he had practiced with the demon hell dragon tattoo himself. That means that the person who suffered for 10,000 years was you? Han Sen demanded angrily. Lando nodded. Because I was merely cloned from his genes, I didn't possess deified powers. Before I could practice with the demon hell dragon tattoo, I had to achieve king-class powers at the very least. So, he let me start practicing. And to prevent the chance of there being compatibility issues further down the line, I learned all the same skills that he had learned in his youth. I was just a genetic clone. I didn't have memories, and I couldn't think for myself. I was like a baby. I only had the knowledge, thought processes, and powers that I was given. Other dragons believed that I was his student, and his favorite student, at that. People thought he treated me like a son and gave me everything. He taught me many secret skills, but no one knew he did that for the sole purpose of replicating himself within me. If he hadn't trained me exactly the way he had been trained, he thought there might be issues when he tried to harvest the demon hell dragon tattoo. Han Sen's heart sank as he listened. A deified elite had created and brainwashed a baby. Also, he could inflict unimaginable pain on the child to further his own power. Lando probably hadn't even fully understood why he was suffering. If you were a clone, you guys must have looked identical. Did no one else notice that? Han Sen asked. Lando smiled, and that smile was chilling. Changing one's appearance isn't difficult. You just need to change a small number of your genes. For a deified, such a task is easy. That's what he thought, at least. He made a tiny change to my genes, just enough to alter my appearance. However, he never expected that this minor difference would end up changing everything. Although I was his clone, the environment I was raised in was different than Dragon 2's childhood. As the years went by, the tiny change he made to my genes was compounded by the differences in environment. It was a shame I didn't know anything about this back then. I thought I was his student, someone that he treated like his real son. I just wanted to show gratitude for what he had done for me. I wanted to finish the demon hell dragon tattoo. No matter the pain I suffered, I forced myself to endure it. I pushed myself so hard that I lost all feeling in my body. After saying that, Lando laughed. But Han Sen could tell that the laugh was forced. It was Lando's way of showing that he wasn't afraid of what had happened anymore. Lando trailed off. Han Sen could guess what had happened next. Dragon 2 must have revealed his scheme as Lando practiced the demon hell dragon tattoo. Lando must have fought with him, and that was why Dragon 2 had died. But Han Sen still didn't understand how Lando managed to kill Dragon 2. Even if he was Dragon 2's genetic clone, he didn't have Dragon 2's deified power. Lando seemed to notice Han Sen's unspoken question. He shook his head and said, "It isn't what you're thinking. I didn't fight him. We transferred the demon hell dragon tattoo to him, and he couldn't wait to practice and push the tattoo to the final stage. The process went smoothly, just as he expected. The demon hell dragon tattoo came entirely under his control, and he used his own blood to refine it. The blend was a success, and there didn't seem to be any problems. Then, once the demon hell dragon tattoo reached deified class, he discovered that the demon hell dragon tattoo had a very strong compatibility issue. Imagine a man who has just had a heart transplant discovered that there was a compatibility issue. He went insane. He had already used more than half of his blood to push the demon hell dragon tattoo to deified status. The demon hell dragon tattoo was to be stronger than himself. So, he died. And you took back the demon hell dragon tattoo. Why were you labeled a traitor? Han Sen still didn't understand. Lando quietly said, "In the end, he couldn't handle the thought of his impending death. He tried to take my body, hoping that he could use my body to survive and regain control over the demon hell dragon tattoo." "I don't like this story," Han Sen said with a sigh. "I don't like it either," Lando said. Han Sen wanted to say something more, but something suddenly appeared in front of them. It came right toward Han Sen before he even had a chance to react. A deified demon? When Han Sen got close enough to see the body clearly, he raised his eyebrows. When Lando saw the deified demon approaching, he tensed. "Please don't misunderstand. I mean no harm. I would just like a chat with Teacher Han," the deified demon shouted, lifting his hands. "What are you talking about?" Han Sen looked at the deified demon with confusion. My name is Moldo, the deified demon said politely. I'm one of the Alpha's guards. I'm out looking for Teacher Han. I would like to invite you to come to the demon as a guest. Han Sen was surprised. Moldo was a deified being, and yet he was being so polite, as if they were the same level. The man's voice certainly carried the weight of respect. There was no indication that a deified being was speaking to a mere king. Don't worry, Mr. Han. We demons mean no harm. If you are willing to visit us, we can guarantee your safety. No one will bother you, Moldo said. His manner of politeness had yet to change. What can I do for you and your people? Han Sen asked Moldo, even though he knew where this was going to go. Moldo, still being as courteous as possible, said, Our leader would like it if Teacher Han was willing to bless him. If you are willing to do this, our entire society would greatly appreciate it. Give a blessing? Han Sen was shocked. Then, he realized what Moldo actually meant. Han Sen narrowed his eyes in thought. Are you not afraid that the extreme king will come after you? I am not going to lie, Moldo said seriously. We cannot fight the might of the extreme king, but we have a way that you can travel to us without attracting the attention of the extreme king. Even if the extreme king come looking, they won't be able to find you. They cannot threaten your safety. I see, but I'm afraid that each blessing costs an incredible amount of power. I cannot perform another blessing in such a short time frame. I doubt I would be able to help your leader by blessing him, Han Sen said. Using the Blood Pulse Sutra's self-cogwheel cost a lot of energy, but Han Sen was making it sound worse than it was. He just didn't want to decline Moldo directly. That's okay, Moldo told him. A blessing can't be rushed. If you don't mind, I am willing to provide you with protection. I won't allow anything to pull you into the clutches of the extreme king. Thank you, but I have other things to do right now. I can't bother you to accompany me, Han Sen said. If Han Sen went to see the demon, he would owe them. They might end up being less polite than they were acting right now. In that case, I will not force you. But if you need anything, feel free to call us anytime. The demon door will always be open for you. Moldo then waved to Han Sen and left. Han Sen hadn't expected Moldo to leave just like that, but he suspected it might have something to do with Lando's presence. If Lando hadn't been there, Moldo would have likely just kidnapped him and taken him back to the demons by force. Han Sen and Lando kept going. They encountered a few more kings and half-deifieds along the way. They were even more polite to Han Senator. Some people were like Moldo, inviting Han Sen to return to their homeworlds with them, but none dared to do anything ill to him. Lando's presence was great at deterring that sort of rudeness. Everyone knows you are Teacher Han, Lando said flatly. Your life will be much easier now. Han Sen smiled. A genius like me should be called a teacher. Lando ignored him. He wasn't interested in Han Sen's self-aggrandizement. You're so boring. At a time like this, you and I should be chatting, Han Sen said to Lando. You want me to compliment you? Lando asked emotionlessly. You should say things like, Han Sen, you're the greatest genius in 1,000 years. Han Sen said, Okay. Lando nodded and said nothing else. He wasn't interested. The Tianxia unicorn was native to the Tianxia system. It took them back to the blue clouds without difficulty, but Han Sen couldn't find the white whale anywhere. He began scouring the area. Where are Bauer and the others? Han Sen was worried. He was afraid an accident might have happened. But with the power of the white whale and the little red bird, even if a deified being came after them, they should have been able to escape. At this time, the white whale had come to a stop in a sea of green clouds. A flaming red phoenix had emerged from the white whale to do battle with a deified of the extreme king. It was Bao Qin. The two were fighting like crazy, and fire roared everywhere. Harpacoustics broke the sky. Instead of chasing after Han Sen, Bao Qin had come looking for Feng Qingyu. Upon finding him, he also discovered the white whale. The white whale had a high level of defense, but it was unable to repel sonic powers. Bao Qin used the harp to attack, and he tried to enter the white whale to beat up Feng Qingyu and all the pirates. The little red bird had to become a red phoenix to fight Bao Qin. The fight was so bad that it was destroying the cloudscape around them. Bao Qin had brought other kings and deifieds from the extreme king, and they now surrounded the white whale. Luckily, the white whale had a high level of defense, and its weapon systems were good, too. In the beginning, the kings and half-deifieds weren't making much headway against the white whale. They couldn't penetrate its defenses. But one of the half-deified beings could travel through solid material. He slid through the white whale's shell into its interior. He quickly realized that the white whale was actually a ship. Bauer was happily piloting the white whale, merrily fighting off the kings and half-deifieds. Ningyu was underneath a table with his hands on his head. His asterisk S was sticking out, and he was mumbling, "Don't kill me! Don't kill me!" Fang Qingyu and the pirates were unable to help in a time like this. They hid behind Bauer and kept shouting, "Captain Bauer is so awesome. Little Captain is the strongest in the universe. Kill those curs. How dare they attack our beautiful little Captain Bauer? You are already dead. Little Captain, you can do it. You can do it." They continued to shout insults at the attackers, their faces red. And amidst all the noise, an extreme king man suddenly entered the white whale. He traveled through all the walls and went straight for the command deck. "Fang Qingyu, you are here." When Keek saw Fang Qingyu, he didn't stop. He was drawn to Bauer, who was operating the machine. "Isn't that Han Sen's daughter? You guys are all together? We've put so much manpower into looking for you." Keek realized what was going on. He looked furious, and he unleashed his king area. It covered the entire command deck. Pang, 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 pang. When the area landed, the pirates and Fang Qingyu were crushed to the floor, like iron filings being pulled onto a magnet. Huh. Keek looked up in confusion, noticing that Bauer was still piloting the white whale and fighting the extreme king knights. She wasn't affected by his area. Keek's magnetic area wasn't the strongest king area in the extreme king, but he was still a member of the third highest race in the universe. His magnet king body was nothing to take lightly, especially since he was half-deified. Normal king-class xenogeneics were unable to walk under the influence of his magnetic area. Bauer was just a kid, and she was somehow ignoring Keek's magnetic area. That surprised him a lot. He hesitated, then raised a palm. A black magnetic light appeared in his hand. He wanted to attack Bauer, who was still driving the white whale. "Mister, please, I beg you, don't hurt her." As Keek was about to launch the magnetic light at Bauer, a woman suddenly stood up. Straining against the might of the magnetic area, she stood before Bauer and spoke with a trembling voice. "You can move inside my magnetic area? You aren't bad." Keek stared at her. He decided that he would need to get rid of her first. But the woman suddenly kneeled on the floor and bowed before him. "Please don't kill me," she pleaded from her knees. "Please let us go. We are just useless women. We can't stop whatever it is you want to do. Please let us go as easily as you would release a fart." Ningyu kept begging, all the while repeatedly banging her head on the ground. "Leave if you don't want to die," Keek told her in a hard voice. He was quite famous in the Extreme King, and he wouldn't bother killing a woman if she was behaving like this. Yes, yes, yes. We will leave now." Ningyu got up and started to pull Bauer away with her. Pang! The magnetic light hit Ningyu in the face. Ningyu was sent flying. The powerful magnetic force dragged Ningyu across the ship and flung her into one of the ship's walls. Her face smacked into the wall and stuck to it. She couldn't pull herself away. "You can leave by yourself." "She stays." Keek cast another magnetic light toward Bauer. Pang! Somehow, Ningyu had reappeared in front of Bauer. She crossed her arms to block the magnet this time, and the sudden weight made her arms feel so heavy. They were sucked straight down to the floor. Her face smacked into the floor, and her mouth twisted. "Mister, please let her go. She's just a kid, and I promised Han Sen I would protect his child." Ningyu was lying on the floor in an awkward position. She cried freely, snot and tears running down her face. "It looks as if you really do want to die," Keek grunted, generating a magnetic light in his fist. Ningyu's pants suddenly became hot, and a puddle appeared on the floor. She had peed herself. When Keek smelled the urine, he frowned. He might get his hands dirty if he killed a woman like this. Ignoring Ningyu, he turned his attention back to Bauer again. The magnetic light in his hands was so bright that it was like a black sun. Bauer was still operating the white whale, guiding it to fight the extreme king knights outside. She acted as if she had yet to see Keek there. Keek's lips pressed into a thin line, and he prepared to throw the magnetic light at Bauer. Ningyu was pressed against the floor with her limbs shaking, but she still managed to crawl toward Keek. When she was near his feet, she begged, "Mister, please let us go. We won't get in the way of whatever you want to do. And I can do anything for you? Get lost, you dirty B***t." Keek kicked Ningyu in the face, the force of the blow sending her flying. Pang! Ningyu hit the airship's wall, her face covered in blood. Her entire body was stuck to the wall, keeping her from falling. "If you don't want to die, then shut the hell up. If you don't, I'll kill you. You're disturbing my work," Keek snarled. He stared at Bauer again and tried to launch another magnetic light. "I want you to stop." Ningyu's voice was shaking as if she was on the verge of bursting into tears. Keek glanced at her struggling form, but she couldn't free herself from the wall. The magnetic force had her pinned to the wall like a slab of meat. Ignoring Ningyu, he sent the magnetic light in his hands toward Bauer. "Stop! I told you to stop." Ningyu screamed with fear. Her body managed to tear through the magnetic power, and she leaped in front of Bauer to take the black, sun-like light. Boom! The scary magnetic light landed on Ningyu, and in the next instant, her body crashed to the floor like a crumbling mountain. Her limbs were held down by an iron grip, all crushed and broken-looking. Keek ignored her. He continued summoning his magnetic power. "Stop, I'm begging you. Don't hurt her. I promised Han Sen I would take care of his daughter. I made him a promise." Ningyu wept helplessly from her place on the floor. Seeing that Keek was going to cast that magnetic light at Bauer, Ningyu struggled with the urge to get up. But she had been hit by the magnetic forces 3 times. The force was now too strong for her to overcome. Keek cast another sun-like magnetic light at Bauer. "I told you to stop." Ningyu shrieked, looking at the magnetic light that was flying toward Bauer. Her shaking body erupted with green flames that wrapped her up in a shroud of fire. In those green flames, Ningyu's eyes suddenly calmed. His face and body regained their masculine shape. He looked like a man again. Fang Qingyu and the pirates on the floor stared at Ningyu with wide eyes. They thought Ningyu was a chicken-hearted and useless woman, but suddenly, she had just become a man, and the green fire around him burned and wisped in an unsettling way. "I told you to stop. Are you deaf?" Ningyu thundered, his eyes crystal clear. His face still had the dried tracks of tears and snot. His female garments had started to burst at the seams as he became bigger, but he still looked gentle and soft. "You dare to play tricks on someone like me? You're dead." Keek's hand gathered up a black light. It became a black magnetic knife that came for Ningyu. Ningyu looked calm and composed, and his hands held a green sword. When Keek swung his black magnetic knife there, Ningyu's body was attracted to it. He flew for the magnetic knife. Catcha! The moment Ningyu was sucked into the black magnetic knife, he waved his little green sword. A green sword light shot by, sending Keek's head and half of his magnetic knife soaring through the air. Padong! Keek's headless body crumpled to the ground. Fang Qingyu and the others were frozen. Ah! On the other side, the green flames on Ningyu's body had vanished. His little green sword was on the floor, and his body returned to a feminine shape again. When she saw that headless body, Ningyu held her face and started to scream. She looked so scared, and she frantically stepped away from the corpse. Han Sen and Lando searched in a circular pattern, but they had yet to find the white whale. Han Sen was sick with worry. Right now, Han Sen wished he had practiced one of Mr. White's skills. That way, he could calculate where Bauer had gone. Even just a direction would do. Right now, anything was better than running around like a headless chicken. While the Tianxia unicorn soared through the clouds, they saw a person slowly start to appear. It was Meng Lai, a close relative of the Extreme King's ruler. Han Sen, we meet again. Meng Lai had escaped while the woman of Two World Mountain stole his extreme purple demon dragon. Han Sen thought that the man had already departed the Tianxia system. "You should go," Lando said to Han Sen as he stared grimly at Meng Lai. Han Sen didn't say a word. He just ran. Lando had told him to go because he wasn't confident in his ability to stop Meng Lai. If Han Sen stayed, he would become a burden to Lando. If Lando was alone, he could escape if he was unable to defeat Ming Lai. Ming Lai started chase Han Sen, but Lando stopped him on the Tianxia unicorn. Ming Lai's eyes narrowed. Lando, do you really want to become an enemy of the Extreme King? I told him I would take him out of this place alive, Lando said emotionlessly. This is what I must do. Huh. In that case, we'll see if you have what it takes. Ming Lai's expression was icy. His body transformed into a gold giant as he threw a slap in Lando's direction. The slap seemed to cover the sky itself. Han Sen felt the power like a giant shockwave coming after him. He flew faster. Luckily, the power of the shockwave had mostly dispersed by the time it reached Han Senator. He used the momentum of the shockwave to boost his own speed, and he vanished quickly into the clouds. How long am I going to have to live my days like this? After I find Bauer, I will have to go to Sky Palace. I hope the sky can at least keep me safe for a while. I need someone to protect me from the Extreme King until I become deified, Han Sen thought to himself. Then, he felt depressed. The Blood Pulse Sutra's King area is too strange. It can only push the self-cogwheels of others, and I can't seem to use it on my own Geno arts. I want to enhance my bloodline. Han Sen didn't know what direction he should go to find Bauer, and he had to stay away from the fight between Lando and Ming Lai. Not long after, Han Sen reached the zone where many seas of clouds connected. In front of him was a sea of creamy white clouds. Each cloud looked like milk floating in the air. Han Sen flew toward it without hesitation. When he tried to fly into one of the clouds, though, it was like jumping into a bean bag. Instead of letting him through, it caught him and bounced him back. Han Sen was shocked. The clouds of the Tianxia system were thick, but they weren't nearly thick enough to stop him. Only cloud beasts were actually solid, but Han Sen was so fast and so strong that if he hit a cloud beast, it would be torn apart. But the creamy white cloud was totally fine, and it had bounced him back. Have I run into a high-class cloud beast? Han Sen was shocked. He looked at the cloud in alarm, but the cloud didn't respond. It just floated where it was, looking exactly like all the other nearby clouds. Han Sen couldn't see anything particularly special about the cloud. He hesitated at first, but he did decide to fly around the cloud to inspect it more carefully. He also reached out his hand to touch it. The cloud was very soft. When Han Sen touched it, it dented inwards. But when Han Sen had crashed into it at full speed earlier, the cloud felt very tough. It had been like a beef tendon, but no matter how much Han Sen poked it, the cloud didn't react. It was like a dead object. This cloud looks like a non-Newtonian fluid. Han Sen brushed away the clouds around it, and he found out that the strange cloud was only 20 meters wide. Aside from the fact that it lacked a life force and possessed non-Newtonian features, there was nothing special about the cloud. Why is there a cloud like this out here in the middle of nowhere? Han Sen was confused. He looked at the nearby clouds for a while. He reached his hand into the cloud and pushed his whole body into it slowly. When he was outside it, Han Sen couldn't see a single thing with his purple-eye butterfly. So, he went in and had a proper look. Han Sen's body moved slowly. If he crept forward at a snail's pace, the cloud wouldn't offer much in the way of resistance. After walking 7 or 8 meters inside, Han Sen suddenly felt as if the space before him was empty. His hand just went right through. There's something here. Han Sen felt so happy. This cloud was 20 meters wide, and he had only walked 7 or 8 meters. Despite that, something was stopping him. It had to mean that there was a pocket of space inside. Han Sen carefully stepped through, and soon enough, he reached the cloud's interior space. He looked around and realized he was now in a 3-meter-wide space. Within that empty area, he found a plant. It looked like a spider plant. The green leaves reached out, and they looked quite lovely. Weird. Why is there a plant here? I thought there were only cloud beasts in the Tianxia system, and that there weren't any plants, Han Sen thought in surprise. He kept observing the plant. The spider plant was as beautiful as green jade. The leaves were 1 foot long, and they were shaped like swords. It looked like an art piece carved from the best jade one could find. Its life force was so strong, though, that no one would believe it to be an inanimate object. From what Han Sen could tell, the Tianxia system didn't have the correct conditions for plant life and normal creatures to thrive. Real plants couldn't exist here, And yet, there was a spider plant right in front of him. It certainly wasn't what Han Sen had expected to find when he entered the cloud. Did some other people come here and leave it in the Tianxia system? As Han Sen was thinking, a white cloud began to bubble up out of the spider plant. It rose like a bubble of milk, then went to join the clouds outside. It looks like these clouds actually come from this spider plant. That means the plant is actually native to the Tianxia system. Han Sen was shocked. As the spider plant released more clouds, Han Sen reached out and grabbed it. But when he touched it, it was just like the cloud that surrounded it. The plant was so delicate that it seemed like only a light grip would crush it. But if he used strength, the plant would grow rigid and resilient. What kind of plant is this? As Han Sen curiously examined the spider plant, he saw that there was a white fire in the middle of the plant. Han Sen fell back 2 steps in surprise. In the center of the spider plant, there was a white fire that was like a little lantern. Han Sen looked close. In reality, it wasn't a fire. It was a halo. At the center of the halo was a black bug that looked something like a cricket. The pitch-black insect was similar in size, and it had 2 swinging antennae. It climbed up the spider plant. When it reached the end of the spider plant, its weight pulled the lead of the plant lower. Then, the little creature opened its mouth. Its sharp teeth dug into the delicate spider plant leaf. Catcha! Catcha! It took a little while for the cricket to eat its fill. Once it was satisfied, the cricket began to climb back down the plant. As the insect moved, puffs of white smoke were emitted. The white smoke condensed into a creamy white cloud. Clouds rose from the creature's back, one by one, just like the creamy white cloud Han Sen had seen before. Now Han Sen knew that the clouds from the spider plant weren't actually from the plant. They came from the juices of the black cricket. The black cricket quickly dug back into the roots of the plant and was about to disappear. Han Sen reached out and grabbed the cricket. The black cricket struggled in his hand, and it was a surprisingly strong little thing. It was no stronger than a king, though, and so it couldn't resist Han Sen. The black cricket knew that it couldn't run. Its body discharged a white vapor that soon turned into a fluffy white cloud that wrapped around the cricket. Han Sen held onto the cloud like he was holding a big steamed bun. Fortunately, as long as he moved slowly, Han Sen could still sink his hands into the creamy cloud. The cricket wouldn't escape Han Sen's grasp like this. The cricket can't be any more powerful than a marquise, but the cloud juice it produces is quite amazing. Not even my power can break it. After hesitating for a moment, Han Sen put the cricket inside Destiny's tower. Then, he walked to the spider plant and prodded it. He tried to feel the life force inside the spider plant. The spider plant had a great deal of life force, but unlike the cricket, Han Sen wasn't capable of eating it. He examined the spider plant carefully, but he didn't see anything else of note. He put the spider plant inside Destiny's tower, as well. After emerging from that pocket of cloud, Han Sen thought about it some more. Then he put the entire cloud inside Destiny's tower, too. Once that was done, he turned and flew away from there to continue searching for Bauer and the others. But Han Sen hadn't been flying for long when he saw a bunch of cloud beasts heading toward him. They were a flock of crane-like creatures. There had to be at least 1,000 of them. Most of them were marquises, but there were some dukes as well. The leader was the king, and it had a king area. Han Sen was actually rather happy when they appeared. He pulled out his knife and dove into the flock. The cloud beasts were xenogeneics. After all, killing another king-class xenogeneic would help Han Sen fill up his king-class genes. Han Sen had 4 different geno-arts. Each time he leveled one up, it required 100 genes. When all those requirements were added up, it became a substantial number of genes that he needed. He had to collect as many as he could, whenever he was able to. The cloud beasts didn't stand a chance against Han's senator when he reached them. He cut the king's head clean off. Xenogeneic king hunted. Cloud crane king. Xenogeneic gene found. Han Sen casually pulled out the xenogeneic gene from the cloud crane king's body. He expected the rest of the cloud cranes to disperse after the king was killed, but they all came after him without any fear of death. It was like they wanted to avenge the slaying of the cloud crane king, even if it meant sacrificing their lives. Han Sen wasn't interested in spending the time to kill those low-class cloud beasts, though. He flew away at full speed. The low-level cloud cranes weren't able to keep up, so it wasn't long before they lost Han Sen completely. But just as Han Sen escaped, he saw another group of cloud beasts approaching. These looked like tigers, and there were a few kings in their midst. Haha, my luck is good today, Han Sen thought with a grin. He grabbed his ghost teeth knife and flew to meet them. Han Sen swooped down among the tigers like a beautiful butterfly. The ghost teeth knife he wielded danced like the fangs of a devil, and he killed the cloud tigers one by one. They were king-class Xenogeneics with second or third-tier king areas. Han Sen only needed one attack to kill each one. Xenogeneic King hunted. Cloud Tiger. Xenogeneic gene found. Obtained Cloud Tiger Beast Soul. Han Sen killed 5 of the king-class tigers, and he managed to earn 1 Cloud Tiger Beast Soul. Han Sen felt pretty good about that. There were many cloud beasts all across the Tianxia system, but finding a king class wasn't always easy. And shortly after taking down 1 king, Han Sen had found several more. He was lucky. The remaining cloud tigers ran after Han Sen, but he ignored them and continued to fly. Han Sen had been flying for a while when he met another group of cloud beasts, but this time, there weren't any kings among them. The leader of those beasts was just Duke class. Han Sen thought a punch might be enough to scare them off, but this theory soon proved false. Han Sen punched a dozen of the cloud beasts, but they just continued to come. Han Sen shook them off his tail and kept on flying, but he started to realize that something was amiss. He seemed to be encountering cloud beasts no matter which direction he decided to go. And the cloud beasts were all so angry too. None of them were afraid to die. They came at him like he was their mortal enemy, and no matter how many of them he killed, none of the cloud beasts were willing to back down. This sea of clouds seems a little bit cursed. Han Sen frowned in thought. He decided to head in a different direction, wanting to see if he would encounter any more cloud beasts. The result was the same, and again, he met another large group of cloud beasts. Han Sen changed direction a few times, but he encountered groups of cloud beasts every time. But all of those cloud beasts had red eyes. They leaped for him ravenously whenever they saw him, even if they didn't stand a chance of harming him. This is getting really weird. Although Han Sen had killed many king-class cloud beasts, he couldn't really enjoy his success. He didn't know what was going on, and that made him uncomfortable. Han Sen could kill any king-class cloud beast he met, but the Tianxia system was known for its deified Xenogeneics. If he encountered a deified monster among the hordes of normal Xenogeneics, he would be in for another brutal fight. After pausing for a while, Han Sen flew back the way he had come. The first thing he needed to do was to get away from that sea of creamy clouds. The place was creepy, and the creatures were far too hostile. He didn't feel comfortable being there. On his way back, he encountered the groups of creatures that he had fought before. All their eyes seemed red, and they obviously wanted to avenge the deaths of their kings. So, they all chased Han Sen. This time, it looked a little while for Han Sen to shake off their pursuit. Before long, he escaped the creamy sea of clouds and returned to the light blue sea of clouds. I finally got away from that cursed sea of clouds. Han Sen felt relief. But before he could completely relax, he saw a shadow headed his way. It was the extreme king deified, Menglai. Frustration filled Han Senator since leaving Lando and Menglai. He had changed directions many times and even crossed back over his own path. He could barely believe that Menglai had still managed to find him. If I knew he'd show up, I wouldn't have come back. That sea of clouds was weird, but I'd be better off there than here facing Menglai. Han Sen turned around, wanting to return to that sea of clouds. But just as he started moving, Menglai swiftly teleported in front of him. Rather than attacking, though, Menglai simply spoke. Han Sen, if you come with me, I won't hurt you. Perhaps I can even keep you alive. You think the Extreme King will let me live if I go back with you? Han Sen lifted his lips in a sneer. Menglai laughed. I'm not going to lie to you. You were going to be killed, but things changed once you helped Lando become deified. This ability can guarantee your survival. If you aid the Extreme King with unwavering dedication, we can erase the crime of killing a prince. Han Sen was shocked. He couldn't believe Menglai had said such a thing. But I killed King Bai's son. Are you sure he will let me live? Han Sen said in disbelief. You know, the king has over 100 children and countless grandkids. Meng Lai chuckled again. You didn't kill an important prince. And if anyone else had killed him, there's no way they would have been able to elude capture for so long. But you, Han Sen, are different. If you will work for the extreme king, I can keep you alive. Han Sen rolled his eyes. There was no chance of winning if he fought Meng Lai, and there would be no way of escaping this man, either. He was just pretending to listen, stalling for time as he tried to think of a way out. Seeing that Han Sen hadn't responded, Meng Lai went on to say, "Let's presume you make it to Sky Palace. Do you really think all of this will blow over with time? The extreme king will not allow a prince to have died for nothing. Fourth uncle, it's just as you say. A prince of the extreme king cannot die for nothing. If I go back with you, how would they allow me to live?" Han Sen frowned. Meng Lai smiled and said, "Han Sen has to die. But you might not be Han Sr." When Han Sen finally understood what Meng Lai had been implying, his eyes widened. Seeing that Han Sen was confused, Meng Lai said, "Our people won't let the killing of an extreme king prince go without retribution, and we wouldn't make this sort of offer to anyone other than you. But if you insist on continuing to Sky Palace, it doesn't matter what crime you committed or what skills you have. The extreme king will not allow you to live." Meng Lai's explanation had made things very clear. If Han Sen was willing to submit and work for them, he would be allowed to live. If he couldn't be used to their benefit, then they would keep trying to kill him even if he reached Sky Palace. Han Sen started to say something, but he suddenly saw some blue cloud beasts heading toward them. Meng Lai frowned. Deified elites tended to scare off anything beneath their level, but these cloud beasts were just Marquis class. Despite their complete lack of strength, the cloud beasts charged forward without hesitation. Han Sen thought this was strange, to say the least. He waved his hand, and the cloud beasts disappeared. After his deified power hit them, not even their bones remained. "Han Sen, what is your decision?" Meng Lai asked, looking at Han Sen. Han Sen remained silent, but Meng Lai didn't rush him. He just stood where he was, patiently awaiting a response. Han Sen wasn't mulling over Meng Lai's question, however. He was thinking about the cloud beasts that had just come his way. With a deified elite around, the cloud beasts should have stayed as far away as they could get. They would run off as soon as they smelled a deified, let alone walked right up to one. The horrible expressions on the faces of those cloud beasts were the same as the ones Han Sen himself had witnessed in the sea of creamy clouds. But he was no longer in the creamy cloud sea. An idea began to form in Han Sen's mind as he thought about the enraged cloud beasts he had fought. Before Han Sen could answer Meng Lai, another group of cloud beasts came for them. But this time, the cloud beasts were clearly of a different variety. Several different varieties of cloud beast were represented here. There were a few kings among them, heading up the regiments of various species. Han Sen might be able to convince himself that the low-level cloud beasts were too stupid to detect the deified presence of Meng Lai, but there was no way that the more powerful cloud beasts were that dumb. They were kings, and they led other cloud beasts toward Han Sen and Meng Lai. This was very abnormal behavior. Meng Lai's face darkened in anger. He waved his hand, and his gold substance chains became an area. It killed the oncoming group of cloud beasts. Those first few king-class cloud beasts were killed in a second. Nothing there stood a chance of fighting back. "I am Meng Lai. If you have the balls to, come out and fight me. Sending these pathetic cloud beasts against me won't accomplish anything, you weakling." Rather than looking at the bodies of the cloud beasts, Meng Lai had turned to shout up at the skies. Meng Lai knew that the cloud beasts weren't behaving normally. He thought someone more powerful was deliberately sending the cloud beasts his way. But Han Sen knew that the cloud's beasts had been acting strangely since before Meng Lai had shown up. So whatever was going on, it had little to do with the deified extreme king. Weird. If someone is controlling these cloud beasts, that person must be very powerful. But if so, why aren't they attacking directly? Han Sen thought to himself. Those cloud beasts didn't act like something was controlling them. It was as if they had seen something. Suddenly, Han Sen's heart jumped as a thought crossed his mind. He suddenly looked into his destiny's tower. He had met a few cloud beasts before, but none of them had been this powerful. And the cloud beasts wouldn't be attacking him without reason. The weird stuff had only started happening after Han Sen took the black cricket and the spider plant. At first, Han Sen thought that there was merely something wrong with the xenogeneics in the creamy cloud area. Perhaps they were naturally more aggressive or territorial than other cloud beasts. But after leaving the creamy cloud sea, weird things were still happening. That suggested that the problem stretched beyond the creamy cloud sea. Are those cloud beasts coming after this? Han Sen looked at the first floor of Destiny's Tower, which was where he had placed the cloud, the black cricket, and the spider plant. The cloud had wrapped around the spider plant, but the black cricket had disappeared. It must have gone into the cloud. If the cloud beasts are attracted to these things, then taking them with me might be a bigger problem than I thought, Han Sen thought to himself. But he didn't know if the cloud beasts were attracted by the spider plant or the black cricket. And with Menglai next to him, he couldn't take the two items out to compare them. Han Sen, have you made a decision yet? Menglai asked Han Sen, upon seeing no other intruders. Sure. I will go to the Extreme King with you, but you must swear that I will remain safe, Han Sen said to Menglai after a bit of hesitation. Don't worry. I won't let you die. If you come back with me and work for the Extreme King, I promise that no one will be able to hurt you, Menglai said with grave certainty. Once he had agreed to go with Menglai, Han Sen pretended to be the perfect picture of subservience. He followed along as if he had no interest in escaping. As Menglai headed through the Tianxia system toward the Extreme King worlds, Han Sen trailed after him without any reluctance. Menglai wasn't worried about Han Sen trying to run off, but after they had traveled for a short while, a lot of cloud beasts began to attack from the surrounding clouds. Menglai dealt with those cloud beasts easily, and not even the king-class cloud beasts were a threat to him. However, his face grew increasingly serious as time progressed. He still had no idea who was sending all these cloud beasts after him. He felt like something was watching him, and he didn't enjoy that sensation at all. Han Sen was shocked. The same thing happened to me when I was in the sea of creamy clouds. Even weak cloud beasts charged toward me with no concern for their own lives. From what I can tell, the effect must have a radius of sorts. When the spider plant and the black cricket enter a location, the cloud beasts from that region are drawn toward them. Fourth uncle, did you kill Lando? Han Sen asked after Meng Lai killed another horde of cloud beasts. Meng Lai wasn't in a good mood. He casually said, that kid is a brutal fighter. I wasn't interested in risking my life fighting him, so I just ditched him instead. But don't think that he'll be coming to save you. He was drawn in another direction, so he won't be able to find us for quite some time. Han Sen never thought Lando would die. He just wanted to find out where the dragon might have been. Hearing this did bring him a bit of relief, though. You must be kidding, uncle. I have already promised you that I will go to the Extreme King. Even if Lando was right here, I wouldn't go with him. It's just as you said. If this situation isn't sorted out, I'll spend the rest of my life hounded and scared. Not even making it to Sky Palace will protect me from that. So, I am sincere about my willingness to go back. But you must also keep your promise to ensure my life, Han Sen said, looking as earnest as possible. When the Menglai heard Han Sen say this, he felt a bit better. He nodded and said, you are quite smart. If you work for the Extreme King with full dedication, I will keep you alive. But Han Sen must still die, so you will no longer be able to use your real name. We cannot let anyone know you are still alive. I understand. I don't mind losing my name if that's what it takes to survive. But, Han Sen looked worried. But what? Menglai asked. I'm afraid that someone powerful might not want me to work for the Extreme King. They would rather kill me than let me follow you back. Han Sen injected a liberal dose of fear into his voice. Don't worry. As long as you follow me, I won't allow anyone to bring you harm, Menglai declared. But what Han Sen said did put Menglai on alert. Menglai was sure that some powerful figure was sending these clouds beasts after them, but that person had yet to reveal themselves. The mysterious deified just kept sending wave after wave of cannon fodder after them. If the mysterious deified was unable to steal Han Sen, then he might decide to just kill Han Sen instead. After a few more waves of cloud beast hordes assaulted them, Menglai was able to confirm his worry. The king-class xenogeneics seemed to be aiming for Han Sen, in particular. As he realized this, Menglai grew even more cautious. He pulled Han Sen closer to him, just in case something bad happened. While they were traveling, Meng Lai's face suddenly changed. He pulled Han Sen to a stop and looked deep into the clouds. Han Sen stood behind Meng Lai and also looked ahead. The nearby clouds were in turmoil as shockwaves rolled through them. A purple Kirin was thundering toward them through the clouds. Substance chains swirled around the monster's body life clouds. Deified xenogeneic. The spider plant and black cricket must be incredibly important if they can attract deified xenogeneics, Han Sen thought in astonishment. And there were many cloud beasts following the deified Kirin to boot. There was a whole host of king-class xenogeneics in their midst. Meng Lai frowned and spoke to Han Sr. Don't get too close to the battleground, but don't run off too far, either. If you get into a bad situation too far from where I'm fighting, I might not have a chance to save you. Don't worry, uncle. I truly want to go to the Extreme King with you. I would never dream of running away. Han Sen knew what Meng Lai really meant, and so he answered him with sincerity. Meng Lai nodded. He started to say something more, but the deified Kirin cut him off with a roar. It brought a sky of clouds toward them. The cloud beast's target was fairly obvious, though. It was Han Sen they wanted. Huh? I want to see what sort of person is trying this hard to keep me from bringing Han Sen back to the Extreme King alive, Meng Lai said with narrowed eyes. He turned into a gold giant and ran toward the Kirin. Han Sen didn't flee. Instead, he entered the fight with the horde of cloud beasts. At this point, Han Sen had no reason to run. He was carrying some dangerous goods that could attract deified xenogeneics. Now that he had Meng Lai to take the heat for him, running away would mean leaving behind his protection. I don't know what that spider plant and black cricket are, but they can attract deified xenogeneics. If things get too bad, I'll just have to throw them away. There is no point in risking my life to keep them. At least for now, though, I can use them to my advantage. If they can keep attracting deified xenogeneics, Meng Lai will have a tough time trying to escort me out of here, Han Sen thought to himself as he began killing cloud beasts. Meng Lai engaged the Kirin, but he remained focused on how Han Sen was doing. When he saw that Han Sen had also started to fight instead of running off, it surprised him, and it actually brought him some relief. It looks like he's sincere about following me back to the Extreme King, but that makes sense, I guess. Someone wants to kill him, and he will die if he doesn't come with me. Coming with me at least gives him a chance to live. Meng Lai nodded. As he watched the cloud beasts swarm around Han Sen like mad, he became quite angry. Someone wanted to kill Han Sen and keep him from working for the Extreme King. Meng Lai wouldn't have dreamed that the cloud beasts would be drawn straight to Han Sen. How could Han Sen, who was just a king, invoke the ire of a deified xenogeneic? Even if Han Sen attracted them, they should have attacked Meng Lai first. But these xenogeneics seemed obsessed with killing Han Sen, despite the deified opponent in the same area. That was why Meng Lai believed there had to be some mastermind hidden somewhere nearby. This mysterious person clearly wanted to prevent Han Sen from being taken back to the Extreme King. Meng Lai was a brother of the Extreme King's ruler. He was an old, scary deified. Even if he had lost his extreme purple demon dragon, it was unlikely that another deified could kill him. Although Meng Lai was slowly fighting back the Kirin that was surrounded by clouds, it would still take a long time for him to kill the creature. Han Sen made use of his movements to go around the cloud beasts he fought. He used this opportunity to wipe out several king-class xenogeneics. He was quite pleased to have earned more king-class xenogeneic genes. Han Sen moved through the xenogeneic hordes, using the purple-eye butterfly to check on Meng Lai. If he got the chance, he might be able to attack at the right time and get a deified beast soul out of all this, too. That would be splendid. But killing a deified being wasn't that easy. If Meng Lai still had his extreme purple demon dragon, he could have killed another deified relatively quickly. But since he had lost his extreme purple demon dragon, he had to exhaust his own power. Killing the deified Kirin wouldn't be an easy task for him.